I woke up feeling dizzy, lying in a bumpy cart. The wooden floor was hard, covered only by thin straw. Around me were sacks of grain and wooden boxes marked with a Baron's eagle symbol. Strange memories flooded into my head, memories that weren't mine. I'm Chin Tian, a top scientist from the 23rd century on Earth. I volunteered for a dangerous quantum chip experiment to boost my intelligence. It failed, and somehow I ended up here, in another world, merged with a boy named Green. I decided to accept my new identity and sorted through Green's memories. This world is called the Osphil continent, similar to medieval Europe. Hundreds of kingdoms constantly fight each other. I'm in the Loden Kingdom, which has ongoing border conflicts with the Saladin Kingdom. A peaceful trading nation called the Maslow Alliance sits nearby. The territory I live in belongs to the Kilo family. The current Baron earned this land by killing an enemy knight in battle years ago. The land is large, surrounded by mountains on 3 sides, with a river running through it. This world has a supernatural power called the night breathing method. It lets people awaken a life seed inside them, granting incredible strength. There are 4 levels. Apprentice knights are as strong as peak humans. Official knights can fight powerful beasts head-on. Great knights can create life barriers and live to 200. And holy knights can split mountains and live to 400. I was raised by Old Green, a kind old man who found me as a baby in the snow. He's a former soldier who saved the Baron's life and got wounded, so he can't practice the breathing method anymore. But the Baron treats him with great respect and gave him a comfortable job managing the storehouse. Old Green has the breathing method knowledge, which is extremely rare. Only he, the Baron, and the guard captain have it in the whole territory. The cart stopped at a busy market. Old Green and I bought supplies together. I stayed quiet, following him around, which matched Green's usual personality. Then I asked Old Green to teach me the night breathing method. He smiled and said he'd teach me after I grow up, because practicing too young burns up your life force. The Baron's eldest son can train early only because the Baron, an official knight, channels his own life energy into him. Without that support, a child would die from the strain. But Old Green noticed my eagerness and offered to teach me swordsmanship and archery early. I immediately agreed. We loaded the cart and headed back to the castle storehouse, our home. Watching the scenery pass by, I clenched my fist. In my past life, I risked everything chasing knowledge and power. In this world, I'll do the same. Only by becoming strong can I control my own fate. I drove the cart back toward the castle while Old Green rested inside. The landscape was dry and hot, grass wilting under the summer sun. In the distance, the Baron's castle stood on the plain. Tall white stone walls dozens of meters high, arrow slits along the walls, and a moat fed by a river channel the Baron had ordered dug himself. I followed Old Green's instructions and steered the cart around the castle to our warehouse instead of going through the main gate. The guards on the walls didn't bother us. Everyone knew Old Green's cart with the Kilo family crest. Our warehouse sat some distance from the castle. It stored mostly junk, old furniture, farming tools, nothing important. It was really just a comfortable position the Baron created for Old Green. I realized that after Old Green dies, I'd inherit the job, but without the same respect. That thought made me feel urgent about getting stronger. We unloaded the supplies, and I put the horse in the stable. Then Old Green told me to follow him inside the warehouse. He unlocked the big doors and led me deep inside, past piles of clutter, into the dark back section where everything was neatly organized. He stopped in front of a large cloth covering something. He pulled it away, revealing a suit of armor, his old armor from his days as a knight apprentice. It gleamed in the oil lamp's flickering light. Old Green touched it gently, lost in memories. Then he turned to me. "This armor is yours now. Tomorrow we begin real training. Are you ready?" I straightened my back and looked him in the eye. "I'm ready." He smiled and opened a box beside the armor. He handed me a sharp longsword and a metal bow. They were so heavy my arms dropped the moment I took them. I had to strain just to hold them up. These were only apprentice-level weapons. I couldn't imagine how powerful higher-level knights must be. Old Green told me to stop playing with the weapons and go make dinner. I prepared a simple meal: white bread, honey spread, and roasted meat. In this world, even white bread is a luxury most common people can only afford once a year on the kingdom's founding day. Then, as I wiped my mouth after eating, a voice rang inside my head. Ding! Sufficient energy intake detected. Super intelligent chip activated. My heart started pounding. The quantum chip from my previous life, it had crossed over with me. I tried to stay calm so Old Green wouldn't notice, told him I was just nervous about tomorrow's training, and hurried to my room. Sitting on my bed, I called up the chip's interface. It asked me to name it. I named it Truth. The chip had two core abilities, storage and analysis. One modified cell could store 1,000 years of human knowledge, and the analysis function worked like a supercomputer with top-level AI. I checked whether the stored knowledge from my old world came through. It didn't. The storage was empty. I was disappointed, but I told myself that having the chip at all was already incredible luck. So I started recording everything I remembered from my past life, all my scientific knowledge, into the chip's storage. As a world-class scientist, the knowledge in my head was still a treasure. I turned off the light and lay in bed, but I didn't sleep. I spent the whole night uploading my memories into Truth. I overslept because I'd stayed up most of the night recording knowledge into the chip. Old Green woke me up, and I blamed my tiredness on excitement about training. He believed me and told me to get ready. After washing up, using just cloth rags and salt water since this world has no toothbrushes, I went down for breakfast. While eating, I tested the chip by having Truth analyze the white bread. It broke down every ingredient perfectly, 70% wheat flour, 20% water, 4% milk, and so on. The chip's analysis ability was impressive. Outside, Old Green had already set up a small training ground behind the warehouse, 3 targets, a wooden training dummy, and stone weights. He'd even cleared and leveled the ground. He must have woken up very early to do all this. I was deeply moved, but kept my feelings inside. The best way to repay him was to train hard. Old Green didn't let me start night training right away. My body wasn't ready. Instead, he had me do basic physical exercises first. With Truth analyzing my body and designing the perfect training plan, every movement I made was optimized. The chip gave me real-time stats: strength, 0.9, speed, 0.9, constitution, 1.0. A value of 1.0 equals an average adult in this world. At 16, I was already close thanks to good living conditions. The chip showed me exactly how to improve. Run 3 kilometers daily for a week to raise speed to 1.0. Throw stones 30 times daily for strength. Watching those numbers tick up, even by tiny amounts, kept me motivated. Months passed. I ran, lifted, jumped, threw stones, rode horses, every single day, rain or shine. My appetite grew huge, but Old Green's special status meant money wasn't a problem. People across the territory noticed my training. Common folk and castle guards watched me with envy, knowing I'd eventually learn the breathing method. When winter came and snow buried the roads, Old Green moved the training equipment near our house and announced it was time for sword training. He explained he'd only teach me the basics. His own swordsmanship was self-developed on the battlefield and suited only his body. I'd need to create my own style later after learning the breathing method. Old Green demonstrated with a wooden sword. Even a casual swing made the air rush around me. The chip immediately scanned his stats. Old Green, strength, 1.7, speed, 2.0, constitution, 0.7 to 1.5, damaged, only reaching 1.5 in combat at a permanent cost. Compared to my own numbers, strength, 1.2, speed, 1.3, constitution, 1.2, he completely outclassed me. And the scale wasn't linear. His speed of 2.0 meant he was 3 or 4 times faster than me. He showed me the fundamentals: slashing, thrusting, horizontal cuts, upward strikes, blocking, dodging. He explained how power should travel from the feet through the waist to the arms, and where on the blade to strike for maximum effect without breaking the sword. The chip recorded everything and adapted the movements to fit my body. When I picked up the wooden sword to practice, the chip corrected me in real time. My arm angle was off, losing 20% power. My waist rotation was insufficient, so I needed 3% more twist. With each swing I adjusted, and after just a few attempts, the deformity in my movements dropped below 3%. I felt the power flow smoothly through my whole body for the first time. Old Green was stunned. He watched me go from clumsy beginner to near-perfect form in minutes. After I finished demonstrating every basic move, he quietly walked back inside, clearly shaken by what he'd seen. I kept training, lost in the satisfying feeling of each clean strike. The chip calculated that after 3,000 full power repetitions of these basics, I'd gain 0.2 in strength, speed, and constitution each. The challenge was maintaining proper form at full power, so I decided to master the movements first, then gradually increase force. As I improved, my sword cuts through the air became quieter, a sign that each swing was perfectly aligned, with the blade cutting the smallest possible surface through the air. Eventually Old Green came back and stopped me. He said I'd trained enough for today, and pushing further would hurt my body. I snapped out of my focused state and realized I was drenched in sweat, my skin flushed red, even in the winter cold. The chip said I could keep going, but I respected Old Green's judgment and followed him inside to eat. After dinner, I sat at my desk pretending to read a history book about the Loden Kingdom, but I was actually checking my body's condition through the chip. I had a strained right forearm, bruising on my left shoulder, and tired waist muscles, but everything would heal in about 7 hours. I noticed my body recovers faster than normal people. Maybe it had something to do with my mysterious origins, but I decided not to dig into that until I had real power to protect myself. I put down the book and opened my window to look at the snowy landscape under the moonlight. Everything was peaceful and quiet. But just as I was about to close the window, I spotted a brief flash of firelight in the distance. It disappeared instantly. I pulled up the chip's recording to make sure I wasn't seeing things. The fire was real. I checked it against the territory map I'd been building during my daily runs. The light came from the outer side of the Annabole Mountains, near the Nasan River, the same river that flows through the Baron's territory. Old Green and I both immediately understood. Someone might be planning to attack the territory. I went straight to Old Green's room and knocked hard. I told him everything. He pulled out a detailed map and asked me to mark where I saw the light. I pointed to a rough area, hiding the fact that the chip had calculated the exact position. Old Green guessed it was probably a scouting party. Winter conditions were too harsh for an actual attack, but this was still bad news. He decided we needed to tell the Baron right away. I hitched up the cart, and we drove through the snow to the castle under the moonlight. The guards on the walls recognized Old Green's cart by its Kilo family eagle crest. The patrol leader, Callant, was unsure about waking the Baron, but considering Old Green's relationship with him, he went to deliver the message personally. They brought us into a guard restroom and served us hot tea. The guards kept glancing at me with envy. The orphan who got lucky enough to be raised by Old Green and would likely inherit his breathing method. The castle steward, Basil, came to escort Old Green to meet the Baron. I waited behind. When Old Green returned, his face was grim. He told me the Baron had heard rumors years ago that the Saladin Kingdom had found a passage through the Annabole Mountains leading directly to the Loden Kingdom border. Everyone had dismissed it as unlikely, but tonight's firelight suggested it might be true. The Baron was sending his guard captain OSS and a large squad to investigate immediately. The guards around us looked worried too. Nobody wanted war. Real battlefields meant real death. Old Green and I stayed in the castle that night. Going back to the warehouse would have been foolish with potential enemies nearby. The steward Basil arranged a guest room for us. I couldn't sleep. In my previous life, I took risks with experiments, but I'd never faced actual war. I tossed and turned until I finally fell into a restless sleep in the early morning hours. I was woken up by soldiers shouting, "Kill!" outside. Old Green told me it was just the castle guards doing morning training, not an attack. Watching them practice from the window got my blood pumping. Old Green said my body hadn't recovered enough for sword practice, so I should train archery today instead. But I decided to tell him a secret. My body recovers much faster than normal people. He was shocked and checked me over carefully to make sure I wasn't lying just to rush into learning the breathing method. After confirming it was true, Old Green said something that made my heart race. I could start learning the breathing method ahead of schedule, but not right now. I needed to calm down first after the stress of recent events. He told me to practice archery for now, and he'd teach me the breathing method once my mental state was stable. After washing up, Old Green brought me to the castle's central training ground where the noble children and selected talented youths practiced. The regular guards trained separately since their methods were too rough. Old Green left to fetch things from the warehouse, leaving me with Callant, the patrol leader from last night, who guided me to the grounds. When I walked in, everyone stared. They all knew who I was because of Old Green. A girl's voice called out to me. "Green, are you training with us now?" It was Asheville, the Baron's third daughter, a year younger than me. Her mother was a commoner, so her status in the castle was low. She'd eventually be married off for political reasons. Despite that, she was cheerful and friendly, and quite developed for her age. She asked if I was going to inherit Old Green's breathing method. I told her honestly that I'd be learning it soon. She got excited and asked me to show her the breathing method's power once I learned it, grabbing my hand while asking. I pulled my hand away as calmly as I could, agreed to her request, and quickly walked to the archery area to burn off some energy. I activated the chip's aiming assistance. A blue targeting overlay appeared in my vision, telling me exactly how to adjust each shot. My first arrow hit the bullseye dead center. Everyone watching looked stunned. Asheville rushed over to help load arrows for me. She shot warning looks at the other girls around us, staking her claim. I could tell this was causing tension. In this territory, I'm apparently considered one of the top 3 catches among the young men. The other 2 are Clocaron, the Baron's eldest son who's almost a knight apprentice already, and Okart, the guard captain's son who was born naturally strong. Higher status noble girls chase those 2. The lower status girls target me. I have no baggage. I'm guaranteed to inherit a breathing method, and if I manage to become a real knight someday, my position would skyrocket. The news that I'd be learning the breathing method early spread instantly. Even the higher-ranking noble children started looking at me differently. I ignored all the attention and focused on training. Arrow after arrow hit the targets with increasing accuracy. The chip corrected every tiny flaw in my form. After 100 shots, I was practically a sharpshooter. The chip warned me to stop before I damaged my muscles. I needed to be in good shape for learning the breathing method. By then, most people had left the training ground. Asheville invited me to eat together. I had no reason to refuse since the noble dining hall was the best option available to me. She grabbed my hand happily and led the way. But 2 other girls suddenly stepped in front of us. Layla, the Baron's 4th daughter in a similar situation to Asheville, and Mia, a distant relative of the Baron whose family had fallen on hard times. Layla had a more mature look about her. Mia seemed shy and helpless, but I wasn't fooled. Anyone bold enough to team up and intercept Asheville wasn't as innocent as she looked. I suggested we all eat together. Asheville kept smiling sweetly, but her expression had darkened the moment those 2 appeared. Our group of 2 became 4, with me in the middle, and the atmosphere turned delicate. At the noble dining hall, the table in front of me was loaded with expensive food, goose liver, spiced stew, truffles, and meats I'd never seen before. This was way beyond the usual white bread and stew. The 3 girls must have spent a lot to arrange this feast, though I wasn't sure if it was their own idea or their families pushing them. While I focused on eating, everyone else in the dining hall was focused on us. I could hear whispers from nearby tables, people gossiping about which of the 3 girls had the best chance with me. Some thought Asheville was winning since she was practically clinging to me. Others mentioned Mia had no chance because of her low status. Then someone brought up Lilith, the Baron's eldest daughter, saying the Baron might marry her to me if my potential was high enough. That name changed the mood instantly. Asheville, Layla, and Mia all looked unhappy. If the Baron decided to give me Lilith, none of them could compete. Suddenly, commotion broke out at the castle gates. The Baron and Guard Captain OSS had returned from investigating the Annabule Mountains. Everyone dropped their forks and rushed out to hear the news. I wiped my mouth and headed out too, leaving the 3 girls behind. The Baron went straight to the top floor of the central building with the nobles. All the soldiers who went on the mission were ordered to stay silent. No one was allowed to share what they found. Since I couldn't get information from the guards, I went back to the guest room and said goodbye to the girls. They left to ask their mothers what was happening. Old Green wasn't in the room. I figured the Baron had called him to the meeting too. Old Green wasn't as weak as he appeared, and the Baron knew it. If war was coming, Old Green would be a valuable fighter. I paced the room until the door finally opened. Old Green walked in looking serious, though he softened slightly when he saw me. I asked him directly what happened. He sat on his bed, thought for a moment, then told me the news. It's not good. They found lots of footprints where you saw the fire, along with military supplies. It's likely a scouting party from the Saladin Kingdom. My heart sank. The room went quiet. But then he reassured me. War wouldn't come this year or next, at least 2 more years. The Saladin Kingdom hadn't fully mapped out the mountain passage yet. The mountains were home to dangerous Lord-level beasts that had already killed about 2/3 of the scouting party, based on the supplies left behind. If even elite scouts suffered that badly, a regular army would have an even harder time getting through. Plus, the passage's exit might not even be in our territory. I breathed easier. As long as war wasn't immediate, I had time to grow stronger. Old Green told me to rest well for the next few days. After that, he would teach me the breathing method. I agreed. For the next several days, I barely left my room, only going out for meals, spending all my time resting and preparing myself. 10 days later, Old Green brought me back to the warehouse and down into a secret underground room he'd dug years ago. It was sealed off with only a ventilation hole, lit by a dim oil lamp. This was where I'd learned the breathing method. Old Green explained the key rule. Forming the life seed had to succeed on the first try. If it failed, the second attempt would be far harder because too much life force would already be lost. He told me to get into peak condition before starting. I sat cross-legged and had Truth run a full check. Body condition, excellent. Adrenaline reserves at maximum. Mental state stable. My stats had grown too. Strength, 1.3. Speed, 1.4. Constitution, 1.3. I was confident. Old Green pulled out a thin, yellowed book from his chest. The cover read, Storm Breathing Method. I read through every page carefully. This breathing method was unique. It didn't specialize in any one area. Instead, it aimed for something like a tornado effect, converting outside energy at higher rates with each breakthrough. Users would be far stronger than others at the same level. But the drawback was severe. Every breakthrough was all or nothing. Fail, and you die. Old Green offered to trade the storm method to the Baron for a safer family breathing technique. I refused. In my past life, I'd undergone an experimental chip surgery with unknown success rates. This was nothing compared to that. I started the first movement without hesitation. Old Green backed away quietly. As I breathed and moved through the positions, I felt a strange resonance inside my body. Energy began flowing toward my heart. The chip detected the abnormal energy movement and asked if it should intervene. I told Truth to build an energy flow model and assist immediately. A blue human body diagram appeared in my vision, showing energy nodes forming throughout my body, drawing life force toward my heart. My heart became a central hub, sending transformed energy through my blood. But I could also see that some energy was leaking out of my body, wasted. Now I understood why people fail. Too much energy escapes. The transformation can't complete, and the life seed never forms. That's why you only get one real shot. With the chip controlling the flow, almost no energy was wasted. Everything moved smoothly. Then the storm method's unique feature activated. A massive energy vortex formed around my heart and began pulling in outside energy. Different types poured in. Some felt hot, some cold, some heavy. My body absorbed them all. The chip categorized them as type A, B, C, and marked them with different colors on the model. Under the chip's near-perfect control, the life force tornado that should have lasted only 10 minutes stretched to 30 minutes. By minute 20, my body felt completely full. It couldn't absorb any more outside energy. But I didn't waste the remaining time. I had the chip use the incoming energy to keep washing through my body, squeezing out every tiny improvement. Old Green was stunned. He knew the storm method intimately and couldn't understand how my transformation lasted 3 times longer than it should have. At the 30-minute mark, the vortex finally faded. A round seed, my life seed, formed inside my heart. I could feel it sitting there like a glass marble, quiet and still. I checked my stats. Strength, 2.5. Speed, 2.7. Constitution, 3.0. The numbers had exploded, especially Constitution. Thanks to the chip eliminating energy waste, my transformation was far more effective than any normal practitioner could achieve. According to the book, becoming a full knight meant activating this seed, making it breathe, and connecting internal and external energy channels. My body had already reached the apprentice's physical limit through all that extra outside energy absorption. I just needed to wait 2 or 3 months for the seed to fully solidify, and then I could break through to official knight. I opened my eyes. Old Green rushed over, touching me everywhere, asking frantically if I was okay, if the seed had formed successfully. I took his hand and told him calmly, "I'm fine. I've successfully formed my life seed. I'm a knight apprentice now." He let out a long breath of relief. Good, good. We walked out of the secret room together. I pushed open the warehouse doors. The snow outside was starting to melt. Spring was coming. I clenched my fist, feeling the powerful strength inside me. Everything was different now. After forming my life seed, Old Green headed back to the castle to prepare a celebration banquet while I stayed behind to test my new strength. I set up targets at different distances, 75 meters, 225 meters, 450 meters, and 750 meters. Using the guards' standard wooden bows, which now felt light in my hands, I started shooting. With the chip's targeting assist, every arrow hit the bullseye. At 75 meters, my arrow punched straight through the target and buried itself halfway into the ground behind it. The power was incredible. Then the chip sent an urgent alert. An unknown heat source was approaching from the forest to my right. I saw a human-shaped figure on the thermal display, hiding in the trees. I pretended nothing was wrong and casually picked up my sword, walking toward the targets as if collecting my arrows. Suddenly the chip screamed at me to dodge. A massive wave of danger hit me. My temples throbbed like a blade was about to pierce my skull. I threw myself forward without thinking. A heavy thud slammed into the ground right where I'd been standing. Dirt sprayed onto my face. The attacker grunted in surprise that I'd dodged. Fear instantly turned to rage. I rolled over, drew my bow, and with the chip locking onto the target's heat signature, fired back. The arrow hit. The chip confirmed the target was wounded. I fired 3 more arrows in rapid succession, each one calculated to cut off the enemy's escape routes. The attacker panicked. He grabbed a pale green bead from his clothes and crushed it. A translucent white shield appeared, blocking my arrows just long enough for him to escape. He ran into the mountains, clutching his wounded left arm. I didn't chase him. With no combat experience, running into a possible ambush would be suicide. I sat on the ground, hands shaking, mind blank. The rush of power I'd felt after my breakthrough was completely gone, replaced by the reality that I'd almost died. After calming down, I examined the weapon that had nearly killed me, a large iron-throwing dart with stabilizing fins. I wrapped it in cloth to avoid possible poison. On the tail fin, I found an inscription, Saladin 1st Legion, 1st Scout Squad, Sec. They didn't even bother disguising their weapons. I was clearly a new knight apprentice, and killing me would have been a decent military achievement for them. No wonder he attacked on sight. I climbed the tree where the attacker had been hiding and confirmed it was a spontaneous attack, not a planned ambush. But I still couldn't figure out what had blocked my arrows besides the green bead shield. Then the chip detected something, high-energy material on the branch. I found scattered green powder where the crushed beads fragments had fallen. The chip identified it as crystallized life force that was dissolving fast and asked if I wanted to absorb it immediately. I did. A warm current flowed into my body. My stats all jumped by 0.1. Strength, 2.6. Speed, 2.8. Constitution, 3.1. That might sound small, but on my curved scaling system, those 3 points meant I was about 30% stronger than before. My body was now beyond the normal limits of a knight apprentice. I pocketed the dart and hurried back to the castle to tell Old Green everything. Meanwhile, the attacker, Sec, barely escaped. He ran for half an hour before stopping, coughing blood, with my arrow wound still bleeding badly. He used expensive hemostatic powder to stop the bleeding and wrapped his arm before retreating deeper into the mountains. He admitted that without the life shield his commander gave him, he'd have died from my arrows. Back at the castle, everything was festive. Old Green had already told everyone I'd become a knight apprentice, the first among the territory's young generation. The whole castle was buzzing. Servants hung tapestries with the Kilo eagle crest. Cooks prepared a feast. In the entire Baron's territory, I now ranked among the top 3 fighters, which was a huge deal for such a small domain. But I had no mood for celebration. The moment I arrived, I turned down everyone's congratulations and went straight to Old Green. I showed him the iron dart and told him about the attack. His face went pale when he heard. I also showed him the green powder I'd collected. He recognized it immediately. It was a great knight's life shield, stored in a special material that could be activated once for brief protection. This meant my attacker held a significant position in the Saladin military. Old Green's expression turned grave. If their scouts were already bold enough to attack openly, war might come by autumn, much sooner than the 2 years we'd estimated. He asked what I planned to do. I could tell he wanted me to leave the territory. As a knight apprentice, I had no obligation to stay and fight for the Baron. The scouts had already reached our borders, and the territory could become a battleground. I asked him if he'd leave with me. His silence was his answer. He wouldn't go. Then I won't go either, I told him. But if things get truly hopeless, I'll run. He sighed deeply but stopped arguing. He knew that as a knight apprentice, I could escape if I really needed to. I was staying because of him. The truth was, I agreed that leaving would be smart, but I couldn't abandon Old Green. My soul had merged with the original Green's. His feelings for Old Green were part of me now. Combined with everything Old Green had done for me these past months, walking away was something I simply couldn't do. Old Green handed me a tailcoat for tonight's banquet. As I got dressed, I reviewed my situation. My life seed was at 1% solidification. Once it fully hardened, I could activate it and become an official knight. At that level, no other official knight practicing a normal breathing method could match someone using the storm method. Great knights wouldn't leave their armies easily. My chances of survival were high, but I needed to start preparing now. Tomorrow I'd scout the surrounding terrain and design escape routes. I also decided to start using poison on my arrows. If today's shots had been poisoned, Sek would never have gotten away. The banquet hall was magnificent, candles glowing everywhere, fine food filling the tables, a champagne tower of red wine, and music playing. Behind the scenes, Asheville, Layla, and Mia's mothers had each pulled their daughters aside, whispering instructions to get close to me. When I walked in wearing my tailcoat, everyone stood up. I gave a short speech thanking the Baron and raised a toast. The party began. Asheville was on me immediately, asking to dance. She wore a sky blue dress and made sure I noticed everything about her. Before I could think, she'd pulled my hand against her and placed my other hand on her waist. Dancing with her was harder than fighting Sek. She kept pressing against me, and I had zero experience dealing with this. Thankfully, the chip helped me regain control partway through, or it would have been embarrassing. When the dance ended, I let go of her quickly. Layla and Mia rushed over next, annoyed they'd been too slow. More girls started gathering around me. I was desperately looking for an escape when the castle's steward Basil appeared and said the Baron wanted to see me. I jumped at the chance. Asheville watched me leave with a victorious smile. She was the only one who'd danced with me. Basil led me to the Baron's private room at the top of the castle. It was surprisingly plain: bookshelves, a desk, the Kilo family crest on the wall, 2 chairs, and a table. Baron Kilo sat in one chair. Guard Captain OSS stood beside him like a statue, his massive muscles on full display. I sat down and had the chip scan them both. Baron Kilo, strength, 2.5 to 2.7, speed, 2.4 to 2.8, constitution, 2.4 to 2.6. A balanced fighter like me. OSS, strength, 3.0 to 3.2, speed, 1.7 to 1.9, constitution, 2.6 to 2.8. A pure power fighter. Their stats were roughly equal to mine. Those 30 minutes of enhanced transformation had truly pushed me to the limit. If we fought, my archery might actually give me the edge. The Baron offered me the position of castle training instructor. Instead of accepting, I told him about sex attack. I explained that I needed to focus entirely on getting stronger rather than taking on responsibilities. The Baron saw the determination in my eyes and didn't push. He told me the position would always be open when I was ready. We chatted casually for a while, then I excused myself. After I left, the Baron and OSS discussed me. OSS was impressed that I'd shown no fear in front of 2 official knights. The Baron revealed he'd fully released the pressure of his life seed during our meeting, and I hadn't reacted at all. The truth was, I hadn't even noticed. My soul was too strong to feel that kind of pressure. The chip detected some energy resonance, but I personally felt nothing. Being too powerful had made me numb to subtle things, a strange problem to have. The Baron wasn't worried about me refusing the position. He knew that as long as Old Green stayed, I wouldn't leave the territory. And with war likely coming, I was a powerful asset he could count on. I skipped going back to the party. Too much had happened today. I went straight to my room to rest. Over the next few days, I asked the steward Basil to find me some poison for my arrows. He agreed without question, since I just needed to wait for my life seed to solidify before becoming an official knight. I turned my attention to my original passion, science. I'd pursued power first because I had to survive, but now I wanted to understand the deeper nature of this world's forces. Using my status, I accessed the castle library and recorded every book into the chip. Most were history or literary works. This world controlled knowledge very tightly. Without Old Green, I'd probably be illiterate. But 3 books caught my attention: Wizard Legend, Mysterious Continent, and Mind Enhancement. They looked like ordinary adventure novels, but the chip detected hidden codes woven into the text. After stripping away the filler, the books contained encrypted information. The encryption was incredibly sophisticated, far beyond what this world's known mathematics should be capable of. After 3 days, the chip was only at 77% decryption. This world was hiding secrets. For practical training, I started hunting in the forest on the opposite side of the mountains from where Sek had appeared. I needed real combat experience, and the forest was full of powerful beasts now that spring had arrived. The chip guided me to a clearing where two massive creatures were locked in a standoff. A below's black boar the size of a small hill, covered in mud armor with enormous tusks, and a mountain storm bear, for meters long with devastating claws. The boar's stats were higher overall: strength 3.3 to 3.5, constitution 3.6 to 3.8. The bear was slightly weaker but smarter. I watched as the bear circled the boar patiently, closing the distance bit by bit. When the boar charged, the bear stood up on its hind legs like a human, sidestepped, and slammed its paw down on the boar's exposed belly. A few more strikes, and the boar was dead. I decided to fight the bear with my sword to build close combat experience. My speed far exceeded the bear's, so I could control the pace. I threw a rock to get its attention, and when it charged, I dodged low and slashed its left foreleg. The bear went berserk, but rage didn't help against my speed and the chip's combat predictions. I circled it like a mosquito it couldn't swat, cutting it from every blind spot. After dozens of wounds, the bear collapsed from blood loss. But I didn't approach. The chip showed its heart was still beating. Bears are famous for playing dead. I drew my bow and shot it. The bear leaped up for one final charge. My second arrow went straight into its skull. It dropped for good. I tied both carcasses together and dragged them back to the castle. The guards were stunned. These were night-level creatures. I told them to have the cooks prepare the meat quickly before the life energy faded. The best parts would go to me and Old Green, and the rest would be shared with everyone in the castle. News of my hunt spread through the castle instantly. People figured I'd gotten lucky since the two beasts had fought each other first. But the sword wounds on the bear and the killing arrow proved I'd fought it head-on. My reputation grew even more. Everyone in the castle enjoyed the feast from my hunt. The life energy in night-level meat was especially valuable for the young trainees. Eating it before attempting the breathing method could improve their chances of forming a life seed. The Baron even had some meat stored in an ice cellar, sealed with his own life force to preserve the energy for future use. I was more focused on Old Green. When he asked how I'd killed two night-level beasts, I told him I got lucky and caught them after they fought each other. It wasn't exactly a lie. I just left out the part where I solo killed the bear at full strength without taking a scratch. After dinner, I checked Old Green's stats. His constitution had gone up by 0.1 from the meal. That gave me an idea. If I kept hunting these creatures regularly, I could help Old Green live longer, even if I couldn't fully heal his injuries. Back in my room, I checked the book decryption progress, 79%, with about 10 more days to go. Nothing I could rush. I turned to another project the chip had been working on, analyzing the true nature of life force and outside energy. The results were fascinating. Life force is essentially the body's ability to convert external energy. This conversion peaks between ages 18 and 25, which lines up perfectly with what I knew from my past life about cellular metabolism. After that age, cells gradually lose their ability to divide and regenerate efficiently. This explained why breakthroughs have to happen around age 18. That's when cells have the most potential for energy conversion. Night-level creature meat works because it contains dense, easily converted life energy that supplements what the body produces naturally during a breakthrough. The real bottleneck is capacity, how much energy a person can store. If your natural capacity is too low, you simply can't sustain a breakthrough. This capacity seems partially hereditary too, based on what I'd observed about OSS and his son Okard. Bloodline theory actually had some scientific basis in this world. I couldn't go deeper with my research yet. Until my life seed activated and I could control life force directly, I was stuck at a theoretical level. I sighed. This world chased power, but nobody studied its fundamentals. There weren't even proper research tools. I'd already decided that once Old Green passed away, I'd head to the Kalos Alliance, a coastal trading nation with at least some level of scientific development. For now, I focused on combat training. I had the chip launch a simulated battle. Blue light flashed, and my consciousness entered a virtual environment. Trees, cool breeze, remarkably realistic. Then a below's black boar and a mountain storm bear appeared right next to me, ready to attack simultaneously. I smiled. This was the kind of challenge I needed. I raised my sword and began fighting, guided by the chip's real-time analysis. Night after night of simulated battles against every type of beast I'd encountered My combat experience grew rapidly. I was developing my own fighting style. In the chip's simulation space, I fought 3 mountain storm bears at once. The chip made them use teamwork, coordinating attacks to trap me. It was brutal. I managed to kill all 3, but the last bear sacrificed itself, taking my sword through its heart just to land one final strike that tore off my left arm and ripped away most of my shoulder. Lying on the ground in the simulation, blood pouring out, pain flooding in as the simulated adrenaline faded, I felt real fear. If this had been reality, I'd be dead. The lesson was clear. Never underestimate a dying creature's final burst of strength. I ended the simulation. The forest dissolved into pixels, and I was back staring at my castle bedroom ceiling, both arms intact. The mental exhaustion knocked me out instantly. 10 days passed since my first big hunt. I went into the forest daily, and my skills sharpened dramatically. I could now one-shot a mountain storm bear with a single arrow through the brain before it even knew I was there. But I noticed something alarming. The powerful beasts from deep in the Annabelle Mountains were migrating outward, toward the forest edges. The creatures I encountered were getting stronger, approaching the upper limits of night level. Based on normal distribution, great night-level beasts would appear soon. Something was pushing them out of their territories. The only thing that could displace apex predators like the raging mountain giant bear deep in the mountains was a human military operation, a large one. I had the chip build a prediction model for when the Saladin Kingdom would attack, factoring in everything. Their doubled tax revenue last year with no visible increase in noble wealth, meaning funds were being diverted secretly, increased grain purchases. Through the Maslow Alliance's port, likely for military supplies, the internal chaos in the Loden Kingdom, where the Baron's warning to the Grand Duke had apparently been suppressed by political infighting among the high nobility, and the accelerating beast migration pattern. The result, 90 to 150 days. Each time I ran the model with new data, the timeline got shorter. The Saladin Kingdom was moving faster than anyone expected. The Loden Kingdom's leadership was too busy fighting among themselves to respond. My face went dark. I pulled the dead bear behind me and walked back to the castle without looking back. I had just stepped out of the forest when Asheville, Layla, and Mia came running toward me, their faces full of panic. Something was clearly very wrong. Asheville blurted out the news. Grand Duke Lodahan had betrayed the Loden Kingdom and joined the Saladin Kingdom. War had been declared. Our territory had been abandoned. I dropped the bear carcass and hurried back to the castle with them. Inside, everything was chaos. Servants couldn't work. Guards stared blankly at nothing. Everyone's face showed fear and confusion. I found Old Green sitting on his bed, looking completely defeated. He told me the full story. Lodahan had been the first line of defense against Saladin for generations. In the early days, the king supported him with supplies while the duke provided military strength. But as kings changed, the relationship soured. The crown wanted to reclaim the duke's territory. They started cutting his supply lines, and during the last war, the Bauhinia campaign, they cut off support entirely. Lodahan barely survived. Betrayed by his own kingdom, the duke knew he couldn't withstand the next attack alone. So he secretly contacted the Saladin Kingdom and surrendered. He handed over the Ancillus fortress, and Saladin's army marched in. 1/3 of the Loden Kingdom fell overnight. This was devastating for us. The Baron's territory had been protected by that fortress. Now there was nothing between us and the enemy except the Annabelle Mountains, and Saladin's forces were already pushing through those. Our territory sat on the upper section of the river flowing from the mountains. If the enemy captured it, they could use the river to rapidly transport troops and supplies downstream. We were a strategic target. A baron's territory couldn't fight a kingdom's army. The baron had decided to flee. Surrendering was pointless. He wasn't valuable enough to keep around. His lands would be seized and his wealth divided. Better to grab what he could and escape to another country, where his money and night-level strength could at least buy a comfortable life. Old Green was crushed not because of the escape plan, but because of Lodahan's betrayal. He'd fought in the Bauhinia campaign under Lodahan's banner and had always been proud of it. Now that pride was worthless. The Baron and Guard Captain OSS felt the same way. I understood that feeling. In my past life, rivals had constantly attacked my reputation, my research, my personal life. I knew what it felt like to have something you valued torn apart. I asked Old Green the question that mattered most. Would he leave? "I'm not that stubborn," he said, though his eyes were still full of sadness. "The fortress is gone. There's nothing left to stay for. He told me the Baron had already warned the common people to start evacuating. The hatred between the two kingdoms was centuries deep. The Saladin army would likely massacre civilians when they arrived. He told me to pack my things. We'd leave with the Baron in 2 days. I breathed a deep sigh of relief. If he'd refused to go, I would have forced him. But now there were no obstacles. I started packing. The Baron gathered everyone in the castle and released them from their contracts. Those who wanted to leave on their own received payment for their years of service. Most servants chose to go their separate ways. Only a small group stayed, mainly guards and young breathing method candidates who were loyal to the Baron. Asheville, Layla, and Mia had no choice but to come with us. As noble women, they'd face terrible things if captured by the Saladin army. Over 2 days, I learned the escape plan. We couldn't head south toward the capital. That route passed through the traitor Duke Lodahan's territory. Instead, we'd go north across the Visas Plains, then turn toward Elendil port in the Maslow Alliance. The Maslow Alliance welcomed wealthy refugees even though they rejected common ones. As long as we reached the port with our money and strength intact, we'd be fine. Streams of refugees were already passing through the territory, frightened, exhausted people heading toward the capital with hollow eyes. I watched them from the castle wall and sighed. The capital would never let them in. They'd be kicked around between territories, and some were surely Saladin spies planted among the crowd to cause chaos. I spent the 2 days completely overhauling our cart, replacing every worn part, reinforcing the frame, stripping unnecessary weight, and loading it with as much food and water as possible. By sunset on the second day, about a dozen carts stood ready in the training ground. Nearly 100 people made up our convoy, guards on horseback, families in wagons, everything packed tight. The Baron, guard captain OSS, and I stood on the castle wall, waiting for the scouts to report on the Saladin army's position. I asked OSS about the Maslow Alliance since he'd visited Elendil port years ago. His eyes lit up. He described a place completely different from our kingdoms, governed by a parliament instead of a king, with a massive port where ships from countries across the sea traded goods. No nobility, just wealthy merchants and elected officials. Knight apprentices were common on the streets, and official knights were far more numerous than in either the Lodin or Saladin kingdoms. Yet strangely, the alliance never expanded or fought wars, and both warring kingdoms tolerated its practice of selling supplies to both sides. The journey would take about 6 months. The main dangers were crossing the Visas Plains, a wasteland between us and the port crawling with bandits who preyed on merchant caravans. With refugees and fleeing nobles flooding the route, the bandits would be having a feast. But I raised another concern. We shouldn't only worry about bandits. Other fleeing Lodin nobles might be just as dangerous. With no laws or authority on the plains, some might decide that robbing fellow refugees was the easiest way to arrive at Elendil with more wealth. The Baron and OSS both went quiet. They hadn't considered that. "You're right," the Baron said. "We'll need to be careful around other noble convoys too." The 3 of us began planning our formation and security arrangements for the journey across the plains. Scouts burst out of the forest shouting that the Saladin army was only a day away. The Baron's face went dark and he ordered everyone to move immediately. Despite some panic, the pre-planned formation held together. We rolled out with the Baron leading, OSS at the rear, and my cart in the middle so I could support either end with my bow. I watched the territory I'd known fade behind us. Dozens of carts and 30 or 40 guards pushed forward day and night through dense forest roads. The heavily loaded food wagons moved slowly. Everyone had to walk alongside the carts in shifts. After days of non-stop travel with no real rest, exhaustion showed on every face. Everyone except me. I felt fine, and I had a good reason. The chip had finally finished decrypting those 3 books. The decoded content revealed something called Basic Meditation Method. The chip warned there was some risk of mental influence during the information transfer. I accepted anyway. Strange information flowed into my brain like reading a book with my eyes closed. The words dissolved after I absorbed them, embedding directly into my mind. Here's what I learned. The 3 novels were actually a recruitment tool created by an organization called the White House Academy, a group of white wizards from the eastern coast of the wizard world. They believe in advancing human civilization alongside ordinary people. The books were designed so that anyone with enough natural talent would unconsciously react to hidden symbols in the text. Someone with sufficient talent who read all 3 books would unlock the hidden wizard knowledge inside. The decoded content covered three things: an introduction to the White House Academy, the basic meditation method itself, requiring no special tools or conditions, just steady practice, and instructions to join by going to a Lindell port for their annual recruitment. Wizards, seekers of truth. Fits my past life perfectly, I muttered. The meditation system had its own ranking. Wizard apprentices from 3rd level to 1st, then breakthrough to full wizard. Talent was ranked in 5 grades. 4th and 5th grade talents would likely stay apprentices forever, 2nd and 3rd had a real chance at becoming full wizards, and 1st grade almost always succeeded. I couldn't measure my own talent without proper tools, but as a fusion of 2 souls, I figured I was at least above average. I decided I would walk the wizard's path. But meditation required quiet conditions, especially for beginners. The creaking convoy was no place for it. Then the chip flashed a warning. 5 unknown heat sources trailing our convoy. I switched to thermal vision. 5 figures were sneaking along behind us through the trees. I scanned their stats. 4 ordinary night-level fighters and 1 peak night level. 2 organized to be bandits. This was a Saladin pursuit squad, sent to intercept fleeing nobles and steal their wealth. I relaxed. If they'd sent a great knight, I'd worry. But night-level fighters? They were no threat to me, no matter how many came. They seemed to be waiting for nightfall to attack. I kept quiet and let them follow, watching their every move through the chip's thermal display. I stepped out of my cart and sent 2 guards to fetch the Baron and OSS. When they arrived on horseback, I pulled them inside the cart and got straight to the point. We're being followed. 5 people, likely a Saladin pursuit squad. Their faces went pale. I told them I'd spotted the trackers through the rear window. They'd kept pace with us despite our head start, which meant all 5 were night-level fighters. The Baron and OSS were grim. 5 coordinated military knights against our 2 regular knights and 1 apprentice. In their eyes, we were badly outmatched. The Baron suggested abandoning our supplies and running, hoping the enemy only wanted wealth. OSS added quietly that without food and water, many of our people would die crossing the Visas plains. The silence in the cart was heavy. They were already considering leaving behind non-essential people and fleeing with just the core group. I smiled. It's not that bad. I can handle them. They stared at me in disbelief. My archery is very good. If you 2 can hold off the strongest one, I'll take care of the other 4. The Baron asked if I was serious. I told him I wouldn't gamble with Old Green's safety. That convinced them. I laid out my plan in whispers. When they left the cart, both were smiling, each carrying a small bottle I'd given them. Meanwhile, the enemy squad was trailing behind us in the trees. Their leader, a massive, cautious man, was planning to attack after sunset when we stopped to rest. A young fighter named White was getting impatient, eager for glory, and already talking about which girls from our convoy he wanted to claim. His comments made even his own teammates uncomfortable. White was apparently a prodigy, a knight apprentice who became an official knight in just 3 years, considered the most likely in his legion to reach Great Knight. Nobody dared challenge him except his mentor Dis, the only person White respected. As the sun sank toward the horizon, both sides waited. They planned their ambush. We prepared our trap. Night was coming. As sunset painted the sky orange, our convoy stopped and formed a defensive circle with the carts. The guards set up campfires and torches while we put the plan into action. The Baron ordered expensive food brought out: goose liver, spiced meats, delicacies that filled the air with irresistible aromas. It worked perfectly. The pursuers hadn't eaten well in days. Their young fighter White was already demanding to attack. Even their disciplined leader Carl couldn't resist. They decided to rush in early. While they crept toward our camp, the Baron, OSS, and I slipped into the forest and circled behind them. We were fully armed. I wore Old Green's metal armor, carried my bow and sword, quiver full of arrows. When the 5 attackers got close, a guard shouted the alarm on cue. The enemy tried to charge, but Carl instantly realized something was wrong. Our guards looked too calm. He screamed for retreat. That's when the hidden guards inside the carts threw open the shutters and unleashed a volley of arrows. 3 of the 5 were hit, 2 through the hands, 1 through the thigh. Carl dodged and grabbed the wounded man, throwing him over his shoulder as they all sprinted toward the forest. They thought they were safe. They hadn't checked what was ahead. I fired 5 arrows in rapid succession. Every one hit its target in the chest. All 4 runners crashed to the ground. The man being carried took an arrow in the backside. They pulled out the arrows and applied their emergency powder, stopping the bleeding. Carl looked at us with disbelief and asked how we'd found them. "We spotted you the moment you arrived," I said with a smile. "Enjoy the show." Then Carl surged up and charged us, his men following. They figured injured knights could still overpower us. They made it about 3 steps before collapsing face first into the dirt. The poison on my arrows had entered their bloodstreams. I'd specially designed this toxin using the chip, combining mushroom poison, snake venom, and toxic plant extracts into a compound that caused rapid muscle paralysis. It couldn't kill a knight, but it shut their bodies down temporarily. The guards chained them to trees. One unfortunate detail: White, the one shot in the backside, had landed on the arrow when his carrier fell. The shaft drove completely through his lower body and came out between his legs. He'd screamed once and gone silent from the agony. OSS interrogated them. They resisted at first, but when I started describing punishments, skinning, slow slicing, bisection, they wavered. When I mentioned castration, they talked immediately, especially given White's current condition. They were from the Saladin 1st Legion's elite scout unit. About a dozen similar squads had been sent in different directions to hunt fleeing nobles. Most squads had only 1 or 2 knights leading apprentices. We'd gotten unlucky. Ours had 5 full knights. Behind them came regular soldiers to collect seized goods. What to do with them? The Baron didn't hesitate. He ordered all 5 beheaded. No loose ends. We buried them on the spot. White actually looked relieved when the blade came. His last hours had been spent in unimaginable pain from the arrow still lodged through his body. Every breath and movement pure torture. With the threat eliminated, the Baron calmed everyone down and ordered us to keep moving immediately. Nobody wanted to rest anymore. We just wanted distance. Over a month of non-stop travel passed without any more attacks. Just a few wolf packs the guards handled easily. The landscape had changed from forest to harsh, sun-scorched wasteland. The Visa's plains stretched endlessly ahead, all yellow sand and dry rock. At the forest exit before the plains, we'd found a crowd of weaker nobles waiting there, too scared to cross alone. They'd noticed something about our convoy. Despite looking exhausted, our people carried themselves with confidence, especially when they glanced toward my cart. Word spread quickly that we'd defeated 5 knight-level pursuers, and requests to join us poured in. After discussion, the Baron, OSS, and I accepted only one group, Baron Candia's convoy. His military strength was weak, just himself as an official knight and an apprentice-level guard captain. But he'd been lucky enough to avoid any pursuit, and more importantly, he had plenty of food and water. He paid 3 carts worth of supplies to join us, which gave us enough resources to cross the plains. During the quiet journey, the Baron and OSS asked me to teach their sons, Cairn and Ocard, about breaking through to Knight Apprentice. They offered a full cart of valuables as payment. Since there were no real threats left, I agreed. I needed money for when we reached the Moslow Alliance. The 2 boys were grateful. After each lesson, they'd walk away marveling at how clearly I explained things compared to their fathers, who could only vaguely describe what their breakthroughs had felt like. My explanations, built on the chip's scientific analysis of life force and energy conversion, gave them a much higher chance of success. Then the chip chimed with news I'd been waiting for. My life seed had fully solidified. I could now break through to official knight. According to the storm breathing method, activating the life seed meant giving it a function like a second heart, connecting internal and external energy channels so it could absorb outside energy with every breath and feed it back to the body. Over time, the seed would store more energy. Reaching Great Knight meant activating that stored energy, letting the seed take root and grow, enabling it to extract and manipulate outside energy on a larger scale, eventually forming the life barrier shield. The book described each stage in detail up to official knight, but said nothing about breaking through to Great Knight. The reason was obvious. Nobody who practiced the storm method had ever made it that far. Each breakthrough carried escalating risk, and the Knight to Great Knight transition was the most dangerous of all. I also still hadn't practiced the basic meditation method from the decoded wizard books. First-time meditation required a quiet environment, which the creaking convoy couldn't provide. That would have to wait until we settled in the Moslow Alliance. Just as I was thinking about when to attempt my night breakthrough, someone knocked on my window. The scouts had found a river ahead. Both barons wanted to know if I agreed to camp there overnight and refill our water supplies. Perfect timing, exactly what I needed. I told them I had no objections. The convoy reached the river and set up camp in the usual circular formation. Everyone could finally rest properly. I found Old Green by the river at dusk, filling water jugs. He looked tired from the month of travel, though the night-level meat he'd eaten earlier kept his life force stable. When I told him I was ready to break through to official night, he grabbed my arms, his face torn between hope and fear. He knew the storm method meant risking death again. Are you sure? Why so rushed? His voice was full of guilt. He blamed himself for teaching me such a dangerous method, for being the reason I pushed so hard. I patted his hand gently. The success rate is over 90%. I'll be fine. I left camp and crossed several hills into the empty wasteland. Finding no natural shelter, I dug a cave underground using a shovel I'd brought. With my night-level strength, I carved out a 3 by 3 meter chamber in about an hour. I sealed the entrance, left a breathing hole, and began. As I cycled through the breathing positions, energy inside my body started resonating with my life seed. The seed vibrated faster and faster until it shattered, releasing all its stored life force. Searing pain exploded through every part of my body. What the? I cursed in Chinese from my old life. The chip immediately blocked pain perception, and the agony vanished like a receding tide. The real work began. The chip formed a massive energy vortex at my heart, far larger than the one during my apprentice breakthrough. Outside energy poured in, transforming my body. I hit my physical limit even faster than expected. The chip was too efficient. But I planned for this. Based on my research, I knew life seeds worked like secondary hearts. And some creatures have multiple hearts. Octopuses have 3. I designed a program to split my single seed into 5, placing one in each major organ: heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and kidneys. Only the chip could manage such precise energy manipulation. The heart vortex trembled, then divided. 5 smaller vortexes formed across my organs, each one absorbing outside energy independently. My body broke past its previous limit and entered a higher level. When the energy finally peaked, all 5 vortexes condensed into 5 life seeds. I activated their breathing function. All 5 seeds pulsed in perfect sync, identical frequency, no energy conflicts. Only the chip could achieve this, like creating 5 identical snowflakes. The entire process went flawlessly, exactly as my millions of simulations had predicted. My new stats were staggering. Strength, 5.2, with energy boost. Speed, 4.8. Constitution, 5.2, with energy boost. The human genetic ceiling was 5.0 across all attributes. Great Knights typically range from 4 to 5. I was already beyond that, with external energy enhancement that supposedly only Holy Knights possessed. At this level, even a 0.1 difference meant total domination in combat. I clenched my fist and channeled energy into it, then punched the cave wall. The entire underground chamber collapsed on top of me. I crawled out of the rubble, spitting dirt. Next time I test my strength, I'm finding a proper location. The chip calculated that my punch released about 7.5 million joules, equivalent to a main battle tank's high-explosive shell. But I noticed something strange. The destruction was far less than that energy should have caused. No massive explosion, no thunderous noise, just a cave-in. This world's physics suppressed energy spread, concentrating destructive force on individual targets rather than causing area-wide devastation. Fascinating, but I couldn't investigate further without proper equipment. I dusted myself off and headed back to camp. On my way back to camp, the chip detected 3 heat sources hiding in the sand ahead, an ambush. I kept walking calmly while scanning them. All 3 were night level. After what I'd just become, they were no threat at all. I walked straight into their trap. They sprang out simultaneously, one from the front throwing sand at my eyes, 2 from the sides with daggers. Their coordination was tight, deadly against any normal knight. But to me, they moved like they were underwater. I swatted the 2 side attackers' daggers with my open palms. Their hands exploded on contact, and the force slammed them into the ground. I kicked the front attacker in the chest. The sound of his bones shattering was like crushing gravel. He hit the ground as a crumpled mess, dead instantly. I injected a thread of energy into the 2 survivors. Inside their bodies, it acted like a hammer smashing their organs. I could stop it whenever I wanted. I pulled off their masks. 2 men, middle-aged. I paused the internal destruction and asked who sent them. They talked immediately. They were assassins from the Shadow Organization, a freelance platform where killers pick bounty jobs. The Saladin Kingdom had posted a hit on me after I killed their 5 knights, including one with great knight potential. They couldn't spare troops to chase me, so they outsourced my assassination. Then the important question: how did they know I'd left camp? Baron Candia. He'd been bribed to monitor my movements. When I left camp, he told them which direction I went, and they set up the ambush. The chip confirmed through micro-expression analysis that they were telling the truth. I released enough killing intent that both men lost control of their bladders. Then I pulled it back and crouched in front of them. Want to live or die? Live, live. They scrambled to their knees, kowtowing desperately. They introduced themselves as Wade and Dyla. I asked if the Shadow Organization would keep sending assassins. Wade explained it was just a loose platform. They posted bounties, killers chose jobs. Their 3-knight team was already top tier. Anything higher would just be more knights or maybe a great knight, which clearly wouldn't be a problem for me either. The real solution was getting the Saladin Kingdom to cancel the bounty. I gave them one task: come back to camp and identify Baron Candia for me. After that, they could leave. They agreed frantically. As we walked back, I deliberately turned my back to them. Neither made a move. They were too terrified. They just quietly treated their wounds and followed. Of course, I wasn't actually exposed. The chip monitored everything around me in full 360 degrees. If either of them had twitched wrong, they'd have joined their dead partner. I rushed back toward camp, the 2 assassins struggling to keep up behind me. A thought hit me mid-stride. Candia had waited until everyone was relaxed by the river to report my position. He wasn't just after the assassination bounty. He wanted our convoy's wealth too. With my enhanced senses as a newly promoted official knight, I could hear voices from camp while still far away. People were still talking normally. Candia hadn't made his move yet. He was waiting for the assassins to confirm my death first. I signaled the 2 killers to stay back and crept toward Candia's cart. Through the thin walls, I heard him talking with his guard Captain Klee. Is everything in place? Yes, Baron. The chip matched their voice sprints instantly. Candia was explaining his plan. He'd put Mandela flower toxin into the water supply. It was colorless, odorless, and wouldn't kill anyone, but it caused powerful hallucinations that would leave everyone completely helpless. Once our people were incapacitated, Candia's men would take everything. I breathed a sigh of relief. It wasn't a slow-acting poison with some hidden antidote, just a hallucinogenic plant toxin that knights could resist. I smashed through the cart wall, grabbed both men, and dragged them across the rocky ground by their arms. By the time I stopped, their faces were ground to raw meat and their bodies were shredded. The entire camp froze in stunned silence. I stepped on Candia's head. Not a single person from your own convoy is speaking up for you. They won't even ask me why I'm doing this. He begged for his life, offered me all his treasure. I smiled. Why would I bargain? After I kill you, it's all mine anyway. I crushed both their skulls under my boots. Then I called the 2 assassins forward to explain everything to the camp. The Saladin bounty, Candia's betrayal, the poison plot. As Wade talked, our people's faces hardened with fury. Candia's people went pale with terror. One of Candia's maids broke first, dropping to her knees and slamming her head against the ground until it bled, begging for mercy. The rest followed, all kneeling and pleading. I called Asheville to bring paper and ink. She understood immediately and ran to get them, looking strangely pleased. I gave Candia's people 2 choices: leave the convoy and fend for themselves in the wasteland, or sign a slave contract and become my property. Every single one chose the contract. Most of them had been forced to serve Candia anyway, and they'd already heard from our people that I was fair to deal with. But I used the chip's micro-expression scanning to identify about a dozen who were lying, Candia loyalists pretending to submit. I pulled them out and killed them on the spot. After that, another scan confirmed everyone remaining was genuine. I told them to clean up the mess. As I headed to the river to wash off the blood and dirt caking my body, the 2 assassins asked if they could leave. I told them yes. They thanked me profusely and ran. 2 muffled explosions sounded in the distance moments later. I'd never actually stopped the destructive energy I'd planted inside them, just suppressed it temporarily. Once they got far enough away, it reactivated, stronger than before. I wasn't going to let killers who knew my capabilities walk free. I glanced back, then continued toward the river. We brought your clothes. Layla and Mia appeared carrying fresh garments on a tray. They'd clearly noticed Asheville gaining ground with me and felt the pressure. They set the clothes by the riverbank and walked away slowly, glancing back repeatedly, faces flushed. wanting to say something but never finding the words. I'd been in this world long enough to understand what was happening. I was starting to accept this world's ways. 5 months later, we finally crossed into the Maslow Alliance. The barren wasteland gave way to lush green plains under a pleasant autumn breeze. We met other refugee nobles heading to a Lindel port along the way, and I gathered information from them. During the journey, my body had grown significantly stronger through continuous use of the breathing method, approaching my limits. As an official knight, I could now control and project life energy externally. I converted one of our carts into a mobile laboratory, my first real chance to return to being a scientist. My lab was divided in two. One side held potted plants of various species. The other was filled with jars containing insects and small animals. I'd been experimenting with how life energy affects different organisms. The results were fascinating. Plants, given life energy, tended to extend their lifespan rather than mutate, with flowers lengthening their blooming period to spread more seeds. Insects reacted completely differently. They grew enormous and developed extreme attack organs, but their lifespans shortened drastically. Even when I tried to interfere with this pattern, they'd return to aggressive growth once I stopped. Mammals improved overall when infused with life energy, but the enhancement faded once the external energy ran out. I watched my latest experiment, a half-meter centipede I'd grown through life energy infusion, die in its jar, having reached its cellular limits. I dissolved it with a special corrosive solution I'd developed for disposing of failed specimens. My larger project, building a model of how the body converts external energy, was stuck at 7% due to missing data. I needed proper research instruments, which I could only find in Elendil. When the convoy stopped for a meal, Asheville called me out of the lab. She'd become my unofficial manager after writing the slave contracts for Candia's people. She was genuinely talented at organizing, and I was happy to let her handle it. The responsibility had matured her. Her girlish nervousness had been replaced by a calm confidence, though her voice and figure still created that strange contrast. She grabbed my hand as we walked to eat, pressing it against herself. I glanced at her, but said nothing. At the picnic blanket, Layla and Mia were already waiting. Asheville sat next to me and shot them a challenging look. After half a year, I'd expected those two to give up, but they never did. Mia needed security. Once we reached Elendil, the Baron might stop supporting her, and I was her best option. Layla was fighting against being married off to some local noble the Baron planned to use for political connections. Only I had enough influence to stop the Baron. Old Green sat nearby, grinning at the whole scene. He'd figured everything out long ago and was thoroughly enjoying it. How much longer to Elendil? I asked him, partly to change the subject. He thought for a moment. About 2 weeks. The roads inside the Alliance are much better, so we'll move faster. 2 weeks. Not enough time for another full experiment cycle. I started planning what life in Elendil would look like. When we finally reached Elendil port, I was stunned by what I saw. Massive blue-gray walls dozens of meters high stretched endlessly in both directions. Hard to believe this was a medieval society. Outside the walls, slums had sprung up, filled with refugees from the Loden Kingdom who couldn't afford to enter. Robbery and worse happened openly. No laws, no order, just survival of the strongest. Mia went pale watching from inside our cart. She knew the Baron might abandon her here. Then it happened. As Baron Kilo's convoy reached the gate, I watched through the window as his expression darkened during negotiations with the guards. He turned back, looked at me, hesitated, then shook his head. He paid and entered, but most of his servants were kicked off the carts. Mia's mother Mira was among them. The abandoned women wept and clung to the wagons, but the guards kicked them away. Asheville, Layla, and Mia all went white. If the Baron abandoned even Asheville, his best connection to me, something had gone very wrong. Mia, go get your mother, I said. Her eyes lit up instantly. She stammered a thank you and jumped off to bring Mira back. I stepped down from the cart to handle things myself. The gate guards were all knight level, hundreds of them, not a single apprentice among them. This city's military power dwarfed both the Loden and Saladin kingdoms combined. The soldier at the gate sized me up. From Loden, I nodded. 1 gold coin to enter. 100 gold coins per person for Maslow Alliance citizenship. My eyebrows shot up. 1 gold coin equaled 10,000 copper coins. A common worker earned 3 coppers a day. 10 years of wages just to enter once. But with citizenship, entry dropped to 1 copper, the real price for locals. I understood the Baron's choice now. His convoy had 62 people. Buying citizenship for all would cost 6,200 gold, plus 2,000 for a mandatory estate purchase, leaving almost nothing from his roughly 7,000 gold. He'd prioritized his soldiers over servants and cut everyone else loose, including his connection to me. He probably figured that in a city full of night-level guards, my strength wasn't special anymore. Fair enough. His choice. Our relationship ended here. My convoy had 28 people, plus the 27 women the Baron had just abandoned were hovering near my carts, hoping. 55, I told the soldier. He looked up from counting coins. 55? Are you sure, sir? You heard me. I had Asheville tell the abandoned women to line up for registration. They stared in disbelief, then fell to their knees, thanking me like I was a god. I waved them up and told them to hurry. The soldiers' attitudes toward me changed completely. One quietly pulled me aside and warned me about local gangs that target newcomers. He told me to go straight to the Central District and buy an estate for about 2,000 gold. That would establish me as a proper resident. I slipped him 10 gold coins for the advice. I wasn't doing this out of pure kindness. These women had all served in the castle with Old Green. They knew him and could take care of him properly. That was worth far more than 5,500 gold coins to me. As for money, with my abilities, earning more would never be a problem. Once everyone had their Maslow Alliance citizenship, we drove through the gates of Elendil Port. The contrast with the slums outside was stark. Clean streets, patrolling guards who fined and whipped anyone caught littering. Shops lined both sides selling crafts, food, and seafood from the harbor. I even spotted a shop selling pearl mystery boxes. The city buzzed with commerce. I hired an official guide from the local guide organization, more expensive than freelancers, but trustworthy. He led us through winding streets for about half an hour until we reached a large open area in front of a 6-story gray-white stone building. Several carts with Loden Kingdom markings were already parked nearby. A greeter came out to direct us. Inside the building, the Trick Guild, everything was lavish. Crystal chandeliers, silver-carved railings, furniture made from rare wood. A well-dressed man named Infia introduced himself and asked how he could help. I need an estate. Somewhere quiet. Available now, I said directly. He led me to a massive sand table model of the city and showed me 3 options on the inner edge of the city district. He emphasized that these locations wouldn't attract unwanted attention. I understood the hint about local gangs targeting newcomers. I chose the Eastern Estate because it was closest to Elendil's public library. I needed access to knowledge for my research. The price was 2,500 gold coins. Expensive, but worth the protection and legitimacy that came with property ownership. I had Asheville pay from our reserves. Infia was visibly excited about the commission and personally led our convoy to the property. The estate was larger than I expected for an edge of the city location. White walls about 2 meters high surrounded it, with an iron gate at the entrance. Inside, a large courtyard held a fountain and pool, and at the center stood an impressive 7-story villa. I surveyed the surroundings and nodded with satisfaction. Money well spent. I told everyone to start cleaning and exploring the grounds. The excitement on people's faces was unmistakable. After half a year on the road, sleeping in carts, this estate meant real shelter. The women who'd nearly ended up in the slums outside looked at me with something close to worship. Without me, they'd be fighting for survival in a lawless wasteland. They knew it. As for me, I felt something unexpected, a deep sense of calm settling over me. Maybe it was some ancient farming instinct from my Chinese heritage, but having my own piece of land made everything feel more stable. The weight of the journey finally lifted from my shoulders. Everyone spent the afternoon and evening unloading the carts. Once they were settled, I went to the top floor of the villa, locked every door and window, and told everyone not to come up until I came out. Finally, quiet. Time to practice the meditation method. The chip warned me that the basic meditation method carried special information that could have unknown effects on my brain. I told it to proceed anyway. The method from the White House Academy worked through meditating on special runes, complex, 3-dimensional cubic structures that had to be built inside the mind. Once a rune was fully constructed, it would solidify in the brain, permanently boosting mental power. The reason apprentices needed absolute silence was that any disturbance during construction could collapse the rune. If the collapse was caused by external force, it could damage your mental energy. Normal apprentices spent weeks studying a rune structure from a book before attempting to build it. I had the chip, which had already fully analyzed the rune structure. I just had to follow its blueprint. The first rune appeared in my mind, a simple horizontal line shape, but its surface was covered in impossibly intricate patterns and 3D structures. Just looking at it made me dizzy. I closed my eyes and began constructing. What I hadn't expected was how grueling it would be. As the rune took shape, intense dizziness hit me, like the worst motion sickness from my previous life. The world spun, and my brain felt ready to explode. The further I progressed, the worse it got. Unknown energy from the air was being drawn into my body as I worked. By 3 a.m., my face was tense, teeth clenched, eyebrows locked tight. Hours later, morning light crept through the sealed windows, and I finally opened my bloodshot eyes. The first rune was complete and solidified. That was nothing like I imagined. Meditation is as exhausting as combat. But the good news was that meditating on already solidified runes would be much easier going forward, though less effective than building new ones. Eventually, with enough runes, I could even use meditation to restore mental energy. The chip ran a full-body scan, and the results were remarkable. The unknown energy from meditation had combined with my life seeds, fundamentally changing things. My genetic ceiling had increased, and I gained a new attribute: strength, 5.4, speed, 5.1, constitution, 5.4, mental power, 3.2 gene limit, 5.5 across all attributes. My mental power reading of 3.2 after just one rune was unusual. Normally one rune equals about 1.0. But my life force cultivation had already expanded my mental capacity, giving me a much larger container. That's also why I could complete a full rune solidification on my first try, something that should take normal apprentices much longer. According to the meditation guide, becoming a third-level apprentice wizard required solidifying 6 runes, second level needed 12, and first level needed 18. Based on my progress, my natural talent was probably around second or third grade, above average. The only disappointment was that the basic meditation method contained no spells, just meditation techniques. I'd need to wait until I joined the White House Academy to learn actual magic. I looked at the morning light coming through the window cracks, ignored it, stripped off my coat, and collapsed into bed. The meditation guide warned that proper rest after each session was essential. Within moments, I fell into deep sleep. I woke up after just 5 hours of deep sleep feeling completely refreshed. From the top floor window, I could see everyone below still busy organizing the estate. The sun was high, plenty of daylight left. I sat at the desk and started planning. The White House Academy's recruitment was in January, 6 months away. I needed to get things in order before then, especially a stable income and proper care for Old Green. I wrote out a detailed list of materials and supplies, then called for Asheville. She arrived quickly, dressed up nicely now that we had a real home, no longer wrapped head to toe against sun and sand. I handed her the list and told her to collect everything on it and find a shop to rent or buy in the city district. She took the paper eagerly and headed out, brushing against me as she left. The chip started reporting my hormonal response, but I cut it off. Not helpful. Next, I had the guards move all my experimental equipment from the lab cart into the villa's basement. The female servants nearly fainted at the sight of the giant insects in jars. Even the guards were sweating and shaking while carrying boxes with massive centipedes inside. They said they'd rather face a real battlefield than carry these things. At least combat didn't make you feel like you'd have nightmares for a week. Once everything was stored underground, I brought out my secret weapon, a special flower sealed in a glass case. It looked disturbing, a trumpet-shaped bloom in a sickly blood-red color, with pale stems laced with red veins that seemed to pulse like flowing blood. Everyone thought it was some kind of cursed thing. Old Green looked at me with genuine worry. I opened one corner of the glass case slightly. Instantly, the most incredible fragrance exploded outward, a perfect, intoxicating scent that was neither too strong nor too faint. Everyone in the villa went into a trance. Some started dancing uncontrollably, completely lost in bliss. Still too concentrated. I'll need to dilute it for perfume, I muttered, analyzing the reaction. This was the stinky flower, originally one of the most foul-smelling plants in existence, like rotting garbage. In my previous life as a scientist, I knew that extreme stench was actually fragrance pushed past its tipping point. During my experiments on the road, I'd controlled exactly where life energy entered the plant, altering its growth pattern across 3 generations until the stink reversed into an extraordinary fragrance. There was an unexpected bonus too. Because my experimental environment contained predatory plants, the stinky flower had evolved to mimic them, adding a mild hallucinogenic quality to its scent. Uncontrolled, the fragrance could spread for miles. This was my business plan. Perfume made from this flower would sell like crazy in a wealthy port city where women had money to spend on luxury goods. As the scent faded, people snapped out of their trance. Those who'd been dancing turned beet red with embarrassment. I didn't judge them. The first time I'd smelled it on the card, I'd almost been affected too. Only the chip's warning and my night-level constitution saved me from dancing around myself. I looked at the flower and considered my options: mass production or limited luxury releases. Either way, money was about to stop being a problem. Once Asheville brought back all the materials, I spent 3 days in the basement perfecting the formulas with the chip's help. The process was smooth. The chip simulated the ideal ratios, and I just followed the blueprint. I called Asheville, Layla, and Mia to the villa and showed them 3 perfumes on the table, each in a crystal-clear glass bottle. The first was a warm amber color. It released a gentle floral scent that relaxed the mind. The second was a light gold. It had an energizing lavender aroma. The third was a dreamy purple. It carried a deep woodsy fragrance that brought instant calm. Each perfume worked by targeting specific smell receptors that triggered different hormone responses in the brain. I'd engineered the molecules from the stinky flower to produce these precise effects. I told the 3 girls to pick one each as a gift. Asheville chose gold, Layla took amber, Mia picked purple. When they put them on, the perfumes blended with their natural body chemistry and created something magical, a unique scent for each person. Even I felt drawn in. The chip confirmed the molecular binding exceeded average standards. The perfumes would actually produce slightly different fragrances depending on who wore them and even their mood. They could even mask minor physical flaws through scent. I told Asheville to price them as high as possible. These needed to be the ultimate luxury product. Days later, the 3 perfumes, Amber Dream, Dawn Light, and Violet's Wish, exploded across Elendil. Every woman in the city talked about them. At parties, anyone wearing one became the center of attention. If you didn't know about these perfumes, other women wouldn't even talk to you. Even men were buying them. I limited sales to 900 bottles per day, 300 of each type. Since perfume was consumable, customers kept coming back. The demand was insatiable. The biggest existing perfume seller in Elendil, the Tulip Trading Company, run by a man named Dark Roman, watched his business collapse almost overnight. His shop went from packed to empty. Roman sent his people to investigate me. His manager Mark reported back nervously. The owner of Perfume House was a young refugee named Green, only 18, with no background, but possibly a great knight. The Shadow Organization's intelligence said I'd killed 8 official knights during my journey. Roman's face froze. A great knight was a nation-level asset. Elendil's only great knight was the city's admiral. No merchant family could survive provoking someone at that level. Even if the information wasn't confirmed, casually defeating 3 official knights at once put me close enough to make any attack suicidal. Roman sighed and made the smart choice. Instead of fighting, he decided to send me a cooperation invitation. His company had the trade networks to sell perfume across multiple countries, something I couldn't do alone yet. He'd propose a partnership at an industry meeting. It was his only option. My business foundation was still new, and a distribution partnership would benefit both sides. He was betting I wouldn't refuse. The perfume business took off exactly as planned. After every potential rival checked my background and learned about the 8 knights I'd killed, nobody dared challenge me. I attended the Tulip Trading Company's industry meeting and signed distribution deals with several major trading houses. They'd sell my perfume across multiple countries while I kept 60% of profits, with a guaranteed minimum price floor. The terms were heavily in my favor, but nobody complained. They were just grateful to survive. I also developed several ordinary perfumes using common ingredients. They couldn't match the Stinky Flower originals, but they still crushed everything else on the market. These could be mass-produced, and Perfume House quickly monopolized Elendil's entire perfume industry. I handed management to Asheville, Layla, and Mia, then turned to what really mattered: research. I devoured every book in Elendil's public library and commissioned rare texts from trading partners abroad. Some contained hidden content, including a wizard spell called Wizard's Hand, a technique that let me manipulate objects with my mind during experiments. It had no combat value, but for laboratory work it was incredible. Synchronized with my thoughts through the chip, I could control 5 objects simultaneously with 0 error, matching what the books described as full wizard-level precision. My meditation had progressed steadily too. With 8 solidified runes, I'd reached 3rd-level apprentice wizard. I expanded the basement into a proper laboratory and threw money at equipment. Wearing a white coat, old habits from my previous life, I worked surrounded by exotic plants, insects, and animals. My biggest breakthrough came from an accident. At a banquet, the chip detected something unusual in whale meat I was eating. A parasite called the Hellos parasite. These ugly creatures, looking like oversized leeches with saw-toothed mouths, lived inside large whales. When a whale was critically injured, the parasites would release healing substances to repair the damage. In extreme cases, a parasite would even convert its own body into something resembling a life seed, sacrificing itself to save its host. The implications were enormous. If I could understand this mechanism, I might create artificial life seeds. After dozens of specimens and countless experiments, I finally succeeded. I extracted parasitic blood, combined it with a complex chemical formula, and produced a glowing emerald green liquid, life potion. The chip simulated its effects. It could heal injuries and accelerate recovery, boost Knight Apprentice breakthrough success by 82%, Official Knight breakthrough by 54%, and even Great Knight breakthrough by 10%. This solved multiple problems at once. I'd been stuck on how to break through to Great Knight myself. Elendil's admiral told me that every Great Knight had stumbled into their breakthrough during near-death experiences, with no idea how. As a scientist who'd already died once, I wasn't eager to gamble with death again. The potion gave me a calculated path forward. It could also help Old Green resume his cultivation. And most importantly, before I left for the wizard world, I could use this potion to mass-produce official knights to protect everyone I was leaving behind. These greenhouse knights might be slightly weaker than natural ones, but quantity would make up for quality. Perfume House needed muscle to survive without me. I cleaned up the lab with Wizard's hand, pocketed the emerald vial, and headed upstairs. I needed volunteers to test the life potion. From the slums outside the city walls, I recruited 3 people for 1 gold coin each. A boy named White, a young man named Alter, and a middle-aged man named Will. The chip had already analyzed their psychological profiles during selection. Each had enough desperation or ambition that they wouldn't walk away. I laid the 3 green vials on the table and gave them one last chance to refuse. They hesitated, but I knew they'd stay. The boy White surprised me by going first. He grabbed a vial and drank without hesitation. Within moments, the potion kicked in. His body turned red, sweat poured off him, and he collapsed, scratching his own skin raw from unbearable itching. He scraped his arms against the floor until they were bloody, unable to stop. I had the guards hold him down. As they restrained him, the potion's healing effect became visible. His torn skin began closing and scabbing over in seconds. Then something remarkable happened. White grew half a head taller in minutes, his body rapidly developing, clothes stretching tight. The chip analyzed the reaction and suggested 2 improvements: diluting the potion and adding black centipede venom to slow the release of life energy. When it was over, White stood up grinning, clearly stronger and bigger. I sent him to collect his payment. Alter and Will had nearly run during White's episode. But watching the results, instant healing, rapid physical growth, their fear turned to desire. They looked at each other, grabbed their vials, and drank. Since their bodies were already fully grown, the potion couldn't make them taller. Instead, all that life energy went into raw physical improvement. Their muscles swelled like bodybuilders, but with matching speed, reaching near human limits. Satisfied with the results, I adjusted the formula based on the chip's recommendations. The final version worked beautifully. Guards who volunteered for testing, combined with breathing methods I'd purchased at Elendil's auction house, mostly broke through to Knight Apprentice. Even those who failed saw massive physical improvements. I had Asheville, Layla, and Mia take the potion too. All 3 had trained at the castle before, so with the potion's boost, they successfully became Knight Apprentices. The results look good, I told them while recording the data. Take a few days to adjust, then in 2 or 3 months, use the potions I'll leave behind to attempt breaking through to official knight. My preparations were coming together. Soon I'd have an army of knights protecting everything I'd built, and I could leave for the wizard world with peace of mind. With the life potion secured, I could stop worrying about what happened after I left. I threw myself into meditation full-time. During this period, I also formally entered relationships with Asheville, Layla, and Mia. After Old Green accidentally let slip that I was planning to leave Elendil, all three showed up at my room one night together. I didn't refuse. As night apprentices, their stamina far exceeded my expectations. Even my great knight constitution was barely enough to keep up. I understood their reasoning. Without an heir, Perfume House would be vulnerable the moment I left. Over 2 months, all three became pregnant, and the nightly visits finally stopped. I could focus on meditation again. I'd also used the life potion to break through to Great Knight myself. My stats now read: Strength 6.0, Speed 6.0, Constitution 6.0, Mental Power 11.0, all at my genetic ceiling. With 11 solidified runes, I was just one away from becoming a second-level wizard apprentice. In less than a year, that was a strong result. As January approached, Elendil transformed. Nobles from countries across the world flooded in, ostensibly for the annual trade conference, but really for the wizard selection. Some had even traveled 3 months by ship, bringing their children. The port's governor, Eric, hosted a grand ball for all the nobles. The invitation appeared blank, but at the door, guards asked guests a specific question. If you answered, "Wizard," they let you in. Anyone without that knowledge couldn't enter. I scanned everyone at the ball. A handful had practiced meditation methods before arriving. Clearly nobles with inherited wizard connections, but none came close to my level. That confirmed my talent was above average. Eric found me standing on the balcony. He was massive. Even his yellow robe couldn't hide his explosive muscles. As a fellow great knight, he was interested in me, the young perfume tycoon who somehow knew about wizards. He asked why I wasn't dancing. I told him I was nervous about the upcoming test. He nodded sympathetically, mentioning that the screening was extremely strict and the fees were enormous. Fees. The White House Academy's meditation book hadn't mentioned any. I clearly still had gaps in my understanding. I casually asked Eric to tell me about wizards. He shared what he'd seen over the years. Powerful, brilliant, reclusive people who pursued truth and knowledge above all else. Some were kind and helped ordinary people. Others were cruel, treating normal humans as expendable resources. His face went pale, remembering something. Clearly he'd witnessed a dark wizard's work firsthand. He gave me one firm piece of advice: join the white robe wizards. Never choose the black robes. Over the years, almost no one who joined the black robes ever came back alive from the other continent. I filed this away. White and black clearly represented different factions, probably not outright enemies since they recruited together, but fundamentally different in philosophy. Competing ideologies. Then Eric offered to introduce me to other wizard candidates at the ball. Smart move. By helping future wizards before they gained power, he was building relationships that would pay off for years. No wonder he'd become governor. I thanked him and followed him into the crowd. At the governor's ball, Eric introduced me to a group of young people also preparing for the wizard selection. Their leader was George, eldest son of the Emiran family, one of Elendil's top political dynasties. He was composed and sharp-eyed. George introduced me to the others, the Fila and Fia sisters from the Filks merchant family, Roland and Asso from military families, and David from another old political house. I scanned them all. Every single one was a knight apprentice, with mental power between 1 and 2, far below my 11. They welcomed me into their group. I asked them to tell me about the wizard world, since I knew very little. George's face went through several emotions before he led everyone into a private room and closed the door carefully. He explained the situation. The wizard world was on the eastern coast, controlled by 2 major alliances, the White Wizard Association and the Black Wizard Council. They had fundamentally different philosophies. White wizards trained students gently, similar to a knight academy. Even if you didn't excel, you wouldn't easily die. But they had high talent requirements and were hard to get into. Black wizards believed only brutal environments produced strong wizards. They accepted lower talent, but the cost was horrifying. They deliberately created dangers on the ships to their academies to weed out the weak. Students who survived faced constant, deadly competition. Every black wizard who graduated was essentially a psychopath. Body modifications with extra limbs and heads were common, and torturing souls was a required skill. George's face was white as he spoke. The others looked increasingly terrified, especially the Fila sisters who nearly collapsed. These young people all carried family obligations. If one organization rejected them, their families would force them to try another. And the black wizards rejected almost nobody. There were 6 major organizations total: 3 white, 6 Ring Tower, Nature School, and White House Academy, and 3 black, Puppet House, Silent Academy, and Soul School, plus smaller groups. The easiest way to tell them apart on selection day was clothing: white robes versus black. But some black wizard groups deliberately wore white to deceive candidates. Everyone looked to me for reassurance. George had recruited me precisely because my great knight strength made me the most powerful person in the group by far. I promised to protect them as long as we ended up at the same academy, though I kept to myself that if things became truly impossible, I'd prioritize my own survival. The mood was too heavy for dancing. I went home and threw myself into preparations. I wrote down over 100 perfume formulas, grew 1,000 stinky flower seeds, and produced 50+ bottles of life potion using every remaining material in my lab. The wizard world wasn't safe, and if I died on the eastern coast, I needed to ensure my family's survival here. I gathered everyone important and announced my departure. Old Green sat silently, watching me tap the table nervously. He said nothing. Asheville, Layla, and Mia, all pregnant now, didn't cry or beg me to stay. They just sat quietly and showed their support. Seeing their faces almost made me waver, but I forced myself to stay firm. If I waited until the children were born, I'd never be able to leave at all. Selection day arrived. The entire port area was cleared of civilians. I got there early, joining thousands of nobles and their children gathering outside the gates. Watching the parents desperately coaching their kids made me sick. Most didn't truly care about their children becoming wizards. They just wanted the political insurance of having a child on the other continent. The kids with poor talent would eventually be pressured into joining black wizard organizations, where most would die. George and the others found me at the port entrance. He explained the process. Wizard organizations would set up tents inside the port, each displaying their academy's emblem. You'd enter one tent for a talent assessment, receive a qualification sheet, and then shop it around to other organizations if the first one didn't accept you. Simple, like university club recruitment from my past life, except with a life or death talent test. Everyone in our group went quiet, silently praying about their futures. Governor Eric appeared at the port gates and announced the rules. No noise. Last time someone was too loud, black wizards killed over 100 people. After testing, those without wizard talent had to leave immediately. Most importantly, before signing a contract you could choose freely, but once you signed, there was no backing out. Anyone who tried to flee would be caught and subjected to eternal torment. The gates opened and we filed in. When I crossed the threshold into the tent area, the contrast was jarring. Complete silence outside, but inside, a buzzing crowd. The chip detected an unknown energy barrier forming a hemisphere over the entire zone, blocking sound and vibrations from passing through. I immediately had the chip begin analyzing the barrier's construction. Estimated 3 days to build a model. Every piece of wizard technology one could study was valuable. Inside, 56 tents stood across the port, meaning at least 56 named wizard organizations operated on the eastern coast. The 6 largest tents belonged to the major organizations and had the longest lines. Most people who went in came out looking crushed. A soldier told me not to wait for my group. Individual processing only, no guarantee of staying together. I nodded to George and headed straight for the White House Academy tent. As one of the 3 major white wizard organizations, it had a massive line, but I wasn't about to risk testing at some unknown tent. I joined the queue and waited. After waiting in line, I finally entered the White House Academy tent. Inside was simple: oil lamps, a table, a chair, and a crystal ball. A white-robed wizard with graying hair sat looking tired from processing too many candidates. "Put your hand on the crystal ball," he said flatly. The moment I touched it, the ball began glowing. A wave of energy swept through my body and struck my mind. The chip asked if I wanted to block the unknown force field. I told it to monitor only. I didn't want to seem abnormal. As the probing intensified, the crystal ball grew brighter and brighter. The old wizard stood up, telling me not to let go. Then my solidified runes began reacting, pushing back against the probing. My mental power started leaking outward involuntarily. The wizard's eyes went wide. "Third-level apprentice? And this rune pattern? That's our academy's basic meditation method." He grabbed my hand and cut the test short. "How did you learn the meditation method?" He scanned me with another energy wave, and his shock deepened further. "You're also a great knight?" I told him about finding the hidden meditation method inside the 3 novels. His eyes practically glowed. Without another word, he pulled me out of the tent, through the camp, and directly onto the White House Academy's ship. He led me through dark corridors to a room and knocked on the door. Lady Lillian, another student, decoded the meditation method hidden in the 3 books. The door flew open, and an invisible force sucked us both inside. A white-haired old woman in robes sat cross-legged before me, looking kind and harmless. But the chip was screaming warnings. High-energy entity detected. Dangerous radiation with 72% chance of causing physical mutation with prolonged exposure. Unknown force field exceeding chip detection limits. Lillian studied me and smiled warmly. First-rate talent. And a great night. Our school is saved. She explained everything. She led a faction called the Limit School within the White House Academy. They practiced the Crawlerous meditation method, also called the Limit meditation method. It could push a wizard's mental power to the absolute highest level possible, virtually guaranteeing breakthroughs with almost zero chance of failure. The catch: the method was painfully slow. Only first-rate talents could practice it, because anyone with lesser talent would die of old age before reaching breakthrough. The Limit School hadn't recruited a single student in decades. First-rate talents were so rare, maybe one every 10 or 15 years, and when one appeared, the other 55 organizations fought over them. Nobody willingly chose the slowest path. The school was dying. They had senior wizards, but no successors. "Will you become my disciple?" Lillian asked, eyes full of hope. I lowered my head as if thinking it over. In reality, the chip was running calculations at full speed. Could I complete the Limit meditation method within my lifespan? How long would the Limit meditation method take me? I asked the chip silently. The answer wasn't good. My genetic capacity could hold 37 solidified runes, far beyond a normal first-rate talent's 24. That was a blessing in terms of potential, but a curse for the Limit method. The higher ceiling meant I'd need even longer to fill it. The chip's recommendation: don't practice it. Other meditation methods would get me to full wizard in about 3 years and 9 months less time. The Limit method would push me to the absolute peak of my level, but the trade-off was too extreme. I needed a way to decline without being rude. So I asked Lillian a simple question. Had anyone who practiced the Limit method ever reached the absolute peak of wizard power on the Eastern Coast? Her smile faded. She sighed. No, that confirmed my analysis. The method was designed for long-lived beings, not humans. No matter how high the breakthrough probability, if nobody ever reached the top, that was the fatal flaw. Lillian understood my decision without me saying it. She told the old wizard Bruce to take me away and let me choose another school once we reached the academy. But before leaving, I asked her for something. Could she give me the apprentice portion of the Limit meditation method to study? A book appeared in her hand from nowhere, spatial equipment, I guessed, and floated toward me. Thank you, teacher, I said with a deep bow. She didn't respond, sitting with her eyes closed. I could see the sadness. Her school was dying, and I was another lost hope. Outside, Bruce finally introduced himself properly. He was my senior, a second-level apprentice, and only 22 years old. I stared at his white hair and wrinkled skin in disbelief. He explained that a lab accident had exposed him to severe radiation, rapidly aging his skin. He was almost done brewing a youth potion to fix it. Bruce was talkative and clearly trying to recruit me into his own school within the academy. He explained how the White House Academy worked. Multiple schools existed within it, each based on a different meditation method. After arriving, we'd undergo further testing to determine which method suited our talents best, then choose a school. Basically the same as choosing a university major back in my old world. He showed me to my cabin on the ship. It was luxurious, upper deck, sunlit, decorated with glowing gemstones for nighttime illumination, furniture carved from premium wood. We'd spend 3 months at sea. I didn't care about the fancy room. The moment Bruce left, I pulled out the Limit meditation method book, scanned it into the chip, and started meditating immediately. I had plans for this knowledge. Even if I wouldn't practice the full method, understanding its principles could be invaluable. In my mental space, I examined my solidified runes and thought about what Bruce had told me. Switching meditation methods became increasingly dangerous at higher levels. Conflicting methods could cause permanent mental damage. Fortunately, the basic meditation method had no attribute bias, so changing away from it at the apprentice stage would cost me almost nothing. Then the chip delivered a bombshell. After fully recording the Limit Meditation Method's apprentice portion, it compared both methods and found 72% overlap. More importantly, it identified modifications that could improve them. What would the modifications achieve? I asked. Using the basic method as the foundation, 45% faster cultivation speed. Using the limit method as the foundation, 50% faster. I nearly choked. Cutting training time almost in half was extraordinary. But the chip wasn't done. During its simulations, it discovered something even more staggering. It could directly split my mental space into separate zones and let me practice two meditation methods simultaneously. Like two construction crews building a bridge from opposite ends at the same time. The methods would normally conflict, different spiritual wavelengths interfering with each other, causing severe mental damage. But the chip could partition my mental space so cleanly that both methods could run in parallel without interference. They'd still need a primary framework to unify everything at the end, but the concept was sound. Could I practice even more methods at once? My heart was pounding as I asked. The chip confirmed, theoretically yes, but practically limited. Too many methods meant too many compromises during integration. The optimal number was 3 to 5 non-conflicting methods running simultaneously. I couldn't practice unlimited methods, but 3 to 5 at once? I could barely breathe. The chip recommended using the limit method as the primary framework since it had no attribute bias and the most stable architecture, perfect for hosting additional methods on top. I agreed immediately. Faster cultivation speed plus higher potential? No reason to refuse. The modification would take 7 days to complete. I closed my eyes and continued meditating with the basic method while waiting. Over the next 3 days, the ship filled up as Bruce brought back more recruits daily. Most were housed below deck. Only a select few got upper deck rooms like mine, and I noticed my cabin was just 2 floors below Lillian's, with Bruce's room directly above. My first-rate talent plus third-level apprentice plus great night status had earned me VIP treatment before even reaching the academy. On the third morning, a sailor knocked to tell me we were departing. I stood at my window watching Alindel's port shrink into the distance. The recruitment tents were gone. Crowds of people lined the docks waving goodbye. Other selected apprentices stood excitedly at the ship's railing, waving back. I felt a flash of sadness looking at the port. Old Green, my unborn children, everything I'd built. But I pushed it aside. This isn't goodbye forever. I'm young. I'll come back. The anchors rose. A deep horn sounded. Green light pulsed across the hull from top to bottom, and the massive ship began moving without any wind, powered purely by wizard formations. Definitely studying those arrays once I reached the academy, I muttered, watching the magic-driven vessel with fascination. As the port disappeared from view, I went back to bed and resumed meditating. A trait from my past life was surfacing, what the Chinese called wan, the relentless drive to outwork everyone around me. I kept to myself on the ship, rarely leaving my room, having food delivered by sailors. Almost all my time went to meditation. I asked Bruce about my companions from the ball. The news wasn't great. Most had poor talent, and George had none at all. No white wizard organization would take them. George could at least go home to his family business. For the others, I could only hope they'd end up in less brutal black wizard groups. After nearly 4 months of total meditation practice, I was close to solidifying my 12th rune, the threshold for second-level apprentice. My skin had turned pale from staying indoors so long, giving me a scholarly look in my wizard robes. Then the chip finished modifying the limit meditation method, and I began the conversion. The limit method was fundamentally different from normal methods. Instead of many small runes, it used a single enormous hollow sphere covered in incredibly complex patterns. The apprentice stage required building this sphere to fill the entire mental space. The creator had brilliantly divided it into interlocking segments, like a massive 3D puzzle, so it could be constructed piece by piece. First, I had to demolish my existing 12 runes. I channeled my mental power and shattered them all, leaving fragments floating through my mental space. Then came reconstruction, fitting those fragments into the limit method sphere structure, like assembling building blocks. Thanks to the chip, I didn't need to worry about stability calculations. The pieces clicked into place precisely. When finished, I had a sphere about 3/5 complete, significant progress, but I'd lost some material in the conversion. Fragments from the basic method that didn't fit the new structure had to be discarded. It stung watching hard-earned meditation work dissolve into nothing, but better now than later when the cost would be even greater. Then I activated the chip's dual meditation function. My mental space split into two zones, one large, one small. Two different spiritual wavelengths began operating simultaneously. In the smaller space, I meditated using a standard method, generating rune fragments. These fragments traveled through a channel into the larger space and seamlessly integrated into the limit sphere. Two construction crews, one building. The sphere grew steadily. Past the two-thirds mark, the dizziness became savage, worse than anything before. My vision warped. A normal apprentice would have collapsed long ago, but my great night body could feed mental power back through physical strength. I forced one final triangular fragment into position. The moment it locked in, the sphere pulsed with light. Cool relief washed through my entire mental space, replacing the crushing vertigo with pure clarity, like ice water on a scorching day. My mental power expanded outward. I could sense energy in the air around me. I detected two radiation sources on the ship, one massive, one smaller. Lillian and Bruce. I pulled my awareness back and checked my stats. Strength, 6.1. Speed, 6.1. Constitution, 6.1. Mental power, 16. Second-level apprentice. Talent. Life barrier, great night. Spell, wizard's hand. I grinned. The sense of accomplishment was overwhelming. I woke up late the next morning after my breakthrough, feeling great. Instead of having food delivered, I decided to eat in the ship's dining hall for a change. When I stepped onto the deck, everyone stared. Whispered conversations erupted all around me. With my great night hearing, I caught every word. That's Green, the one with first-rate talent. His room is on the third deck level, only below the two wizards. Why does he get special treatment? I'm a Grand Duke's son. He's just lucky. I'll surpass him at the academy. Groups of apprentices clustered together, growing louder and bolder since I was alone. Tearing down someone more talented made them feel better about themselves. I ignored it all. Arguing with jealous people is pointless. They have their own twisted logic, and words won't change it. Only fists work, but my mood was too good to bother. I enjoyed the blue sky and ocean for a while, then headed to the dining hall. Behind me, a scheme was unfolding. A small-faced guy and a tall one were manipulating a hot-headed apprentice named Robert, a second-rate talent at peak night apprentice level, strong but not very smart. They fed his ego and jealousy with carefully placed comments. You should be the star of this ship. That guy thinks he's above everyone. He doesn't even greet people. Robert's jealousy turned to anger. He stormed toward the dining hall. The two schemers grinned at each other once he left. Robert was just their pawn. They'd planned for him to pick a fight with me, then swoop in at the right moment to rescue me and pull me into their faction. They'd already sent word to their leader, someone named Ant, to time the intervention perfectly. Meanwhile, I was sitting at a round table enjoying a massive spread of food I'd paid for with gold coins. The dining hall buzzed with low conversation and sideways glances at me. Then a palm slammed down on my table. I want your room. You have one day to move out and carry my things up there. I put down my fork, wiped my mouth with a napkin, and stood up. Robert stood before me, golden long hair, muscular build, a jeweled sword at his hip that looked slightly too small for him, probably gifted or taken from someone since boarding. Your name is Robert, right? Cut off one of your own arms right now, and I'll pretend this never happened. I said it calmly, like I was discussing the weather. Robert's face twisted with rage. He ripped the crest from his chest and threw it on my table, a formal noble death duel challenge. By family honor, one of us had to die. If I refused, I'd have to grant his demand. The dining hall packed with spectators, everyone watching to see what I'd do. Just as I was considering the most efficient way to kill him, a voice called from the doorway. Robert, are you bullying people again? A handsome golden-haired young man in knight armor walked in. Ant, apparently some prince who led the ship's largest alliance called the Three Eyes. The crowd swooned over him. He walked up to me with a warm smile and invited me to join his group. I could see through the whole setup instantly. The two guys who'd manipulated Robert were Ant's people. They'd used Robert as a pawn to create a crisis. Then Ant would play hero and recruit me. Textbook manipulation. I completely ignored Ant and picked up Robert's challenge crest from the table. Robert grinned, thinking I was being foolish. He swung his fist at me. I caught it in my hand. Then I squeezed. His fist crumpled like clay, bones and muscle mashing together under my grip. With a slight twist, his hand snapped off at the wrist and dropped to the floor. Robert collapsed, screaming, clutching his stump. I smiled down at him. You wanted to duel. Why are you lying down? Here, let me help you up. I grabbed his other arm. A sharp crack echoed through the dining hall as I bent his left arm 90 degrees the wrong way. His screams filled the room. Then survival instinct kicked in. He propped himself up on his bleeding stump and knelt before me, begging, "Please, spare me. I'll give you everything. This is the Academy's ship. Killing isn't good here." I felt no sympathy, but I stopped. I'd noticed Bruce standing at the dining hall entrance. Bruce walked over casually, ignoring the blood and broken bones like nothing unusual had happened. "Green, congratulations on reaching second-level apprentice. Teacher Lillian wants to see you." I nodded and left immediately, stepping over the mess without a second glance. Behind me, Bruce looked down at Robert. "If this were a black wizard ship, you'd already be dead and nobody would care. Be thankful our academy doesn't have a death quota for second-rate talents." He walked away. The dining hall erupted in chatter. Nobody cared about Robert bleeding on the floor. They were all talking about me. Eventually, apprentices bribed the sailors for information about my background. When they learned I was a great knight, the shock was universal. Robert's challenge became the ship's biggest joke. And Ant, the mastermind behind it all, slipped away with cold sweat running down his back. I went to Lillian's room. She sensed me before I could even knock. "You practiced the limit meditation method and broke through to second-level apprentice?" she asked, eyes full of hope. "Yes, I found it suits me well. My progress wasn't much slower than with normal methods," I said, keeping a straight face. She looked amazed but accepted it, given that my rapid breakthrough was hard to explain otherwise. "Since you've chosen our school's method, you don't need to wait until we reach the academy to pick a mentor. From today, I'm your teacher." Her smile was warm and genuine. Then she pulled out another crystal ball for an elemental affinity test. I couldn't help thinking, did wizards have any tool besides crystal balls? When I focused on it, my consciousness was pulled inside. Everything turned brilliant emerald green, filling nearly the entire sphere, with tiny specks of red at the edges. "What do you see?" Lillian's voice came from far away. "Green. Massive green. And a little red. Does the green feel like life or wood? Life." When she snapped me out of it, she was beaming. My primary affinity was life element, the same as hers. The trace of fire was secondary. She could pass on her full expertise to me. She explained that while wizards could use all elements, working with your natural affinity was far easier and more powerful. With life affinity, my best path was life magic, life modification, and potion making. Then she gave me an important lesson about wizard culture. Knowledge was the most valuable currency. Wizards traded fairly. Nothing was given freely. I should always remember this when dealing with other wizards. Truth and equal exchange, I smiled inwardly. That philosophy suited me perfectly. As her apprentice, I could learn one advanced course for free from her 3 offerings: basic potions, body modification, or life element structure. Instead of answering immediately, I pulled out a vial of my life potion and handed it to her. She examined it carefully, then grabbed my hand in shock. "You made this? Without any wizard techniques?" I explained how I'd used my Great Knight life force control abilities to design the experiment and create the potion from scratch. Her shock faded slightly when she remembered I was a Great Knight, but her amazement remained. She said my potion talent was extraordinary, producing something comparable to a standard wizard's secondary life potion, using nothing but crude materials and no magical training whatsoever. She strongly recommended I choose potions. The other 2 courses covered mostly theory I could learn from the academy library, but potion making was experience-based, and she'd personally fund my early materials. I could tell she was practically begging me to pick it, even though pressuring apprentices was against academy rules. But I understood. Watching genuine talent go to waste would drive any teacher crazy. "I choose potions," I said. She handed me a magic pattern scroll containing the foundational potion knowledge, accessible through mental power. For materials, I could go directly to Bruce. I bowed and returned to my room, scroll tucked safely inside my robe. Back in my room, I opened the scroll Lillian gave me. Using the chip, I scanned and absorbed its entire contents in minutes. Lillian had clearly packed it with personal insights and practical tips beyond the standard curriculum. She was investing heavily in me as her only student in decades. Now I understood why she'd been so stunned by my life potion. According to the scroll, potion making was one of the 3 most notoriously difficult fields in the wizard world, alongside array studies and magical tool crafting. The challenge was that raw materials varied slightly each time, creating tiny differences only detectable through hard-won experience. Even expert potion makers only achieved about 50% success with familiar recipes, 30% normally, and 5% with new formulas. High-grade potions had even worse odds. Every brew demanded perfect synchronization of mental energy waves, precise elemental micro-adjustments, control of trace elements and ingredients, constant monitoring of changing properties, and awareness of external energy fluctuations. This made advanced potion makers extremely rare and potions incredibly expensive. But this was actually great news for me. With the chip handling precision calculations and running simulations, I could eliminate most sources of error. My success rate would be far above average. The wizard world used magic stones as currency, crystals mined from deep veins that radiated special energy. They served as power sources, experimental components, and universal trade currency. Potions sold for at least a dozen magic stones even at the lowest tier, and high-grade potions could trigger bloody conflicts. I spent the rest of the 3-month voyage studying potion theory and continuing my dual meditation. I mastered all the basic potion knowledge but deliberately held back from showing it. I'd demonstrate my progress after reaching the academy. Being a genius was fine. Being too much of a genius attracted the wrong kind of attention. I occasionally went on deck. Once I ran into Robert. His left arm was in a heavy cast, his right hand replaced with an iron hook from somewhere. But he'd changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a calm maturity. He bowed and genuinely apologized when he saw me. I even detected gratitude in his voice. My beating had apparently knocked some sense into him. Finally, a gentle thud vibrated through the ship. We docked. Bruce's voice rang out. Pale Forest has been reached. All White House Academy apprentices, gather your belongings and prepare to disembark. I packed my things and left my cabin for the last time. On deck, Bruce assigned 3 faction leaders, Ant, Robert, and a third named Gala, to count heads. Over 3 months, the apprentices had organized into 3 groups. Ant's Three Eyes Alliance, Robert's Guardian Alliance for people who wanted to avoid conflict, and Gala's Raider Alliance, which opposed Ant's group. The Academy tolerated this kind of healthy competition among white wizard apprentices. Head count complete, Bruce led everyone down the gangplank. Lillian had already gone ahead, telling me to finish registration with Bruce and then find her. Stepping off the ship, everyone was stunned by the pale forest, an endless white woodland where every plant, from the tallest tree to the smallest blade of grass, was completely white, as if bleached. Bruce tapped his staff on the ground. Follow me. Don't fall behind. The forest radiates energy constantly. Most dangerous creatures have been cleared by Academy students, but mutations still happen. Straggle, and you'll reach the cemetery before the Academy. Everyone huddled tight. I had the chip scanning the environment. The readings were concerning. The trees emitted significant radiation. Ordinary people would get headaches within hours and suffer permanent genetic damage with prolonged exposure. Some trees were particularly disturbing. Twisted trunks like wrung rope, branches clawing at the air, surfaces carved with agonized human and animal faces. These radiated even stronger energy. I asked Bruce about them. He explained casually that these trees were actually predators. At night, if you lingered beneath one, it would wrap around you and consume you. The twisted ones with faces had already fed on something, or someone. Everyone pressed even closer together after hearing that. I, however, felt a spark of scientific excitement. A giant carnivorous plant like a massive pitcher plant? Definitely worth studying later. We walked deeper. The trees grew taller, radiation increased, and the temperature dropped. The white leaves reflected light efficiently while absorbing heat. After about half an hour, the trees shrank and a massive white wall appeared. A giant face materialized on the wall. Input the passcode, it said flatly. Bruce waved his staff, releasing a white rune that settled on the face's forehead. The face vanished and an arched tunnel of white light opened in the wall. I stepped through without hesitation. On the other side, noise, bustle, activity. A large open area with registration tents, tables, and queues of new arrivals just like us. Bruce told everyone to register, get tested for elemental affinity, and receive teacher assignments. Then he turned to me. You still need to register, but I've got to go brew my youth potion immediately. I can't stand looking like this anymore. I'll find you later. He practically sprinted away. I joined a random queue. The registration clerk, a messy-haired apprentice my age, asked standard questions without looking up, one hand on a crystal ball that displayed information. Name, green. Age, 18. Origin, Maslow Alliance. Talent grade, first rate. His head snapped up. Really first rate? I nodded. His tone immediately softened. Go ahead inside. I've already done my elemental affinity test. I'm a second-level apprentice. My mentor is Lillian. Or should I wait? The entire registration area went silent. The clerk shot to his feet. Second-level apprentice? You're joking? Every staff member turned to stare. A second-level apprentice before even enrolling, first-rate talent, and only 18. That practically guaranteed becoming a full wizard. I just smiled and said nothing. My comm was answer enough. After causing a minor commotion, the clerk finally directed me to a waiting area. But every few seconds, someone would sneak another glance my way. A middle-aged man named Newt arrived to guide me through the academy. Lillian had sent him. We passed through an inner barrier, a foggy layer that hid the surroundings, and arrived at a strange guardian statue, a creature with a sheep's head, deer antlers, a long-scaled neck, 8 legs, and wings. Newt explained it was a lab-bred guardian beast with extreme elemental resistance, capable of fighting a full wizard. After passing through the statue's gateway, a massive complex of castles appeared, the White House Academy. People in robes hurried between buildings, all carrying books. Newt gave me a quick overview. 6 main zones: teaching, experiments, living quarters, trading, missions, and medicinal materials. He warned me to keep quiet. Students here were under constant pressure. At the supply castle, an old man at a desk was surprised to see Newt escorting a new student personally, until he heard I was Lillian's apprentice. I collected a gray apprentice robe and an identity pin enchanted with spells for opening castle doors. Replacing either would cost 30 magic stones. Newt then led me deep into the experiment zone, climbing dozens of floors to Lillian's lab at the very top of one castle. Inside, the smell of disinfectant and sharp chemicals hit me. Rows of glass bottles, beakers, test tubes, and unfamiliar wizard instruments filled every surface. It reminded me of a biochemistry lab from my past life. Lillian sat at the central table. She told me that unlike other students, I'd arrived as a second-level apprentice with strong progress, but weak foundational knowledge. I should spend time on public courses to fill those gaps. Then she tossed me a black scroll, a key to Laboratory 26, a fully equipped potions lab on the 26th floor. Free to use, with materials she'd regularly restock. If I performed well, I could request advanced supplies. I could barely contain my excitement. A personal lab, fully funded, before I'd even officially started classes. I thanked her profusely. She reminded me not to wander carelessly. Even in a white wizard academy, many wizards had strange tempers and were best avoided. Outside, Newt had already left. Fortunately, the chip had been mapping every step since I arrived. I found the dormitory area. My room key was black metal, surprisingly heavy, stamped with the number 666. I couldn't help but smirk at that. The new student dorms were lively, apprentices chatting about their journeys. I found my room on the 6th floor, room 66. The lock was mechanical, no magic protection at all. The chip confirmed even a basic thief could pick it. I'd need to learn a protective spell soon. Inside was a simple single room, 1 bed, a washroom, and a small study. Every apprentice lived alone. Even white wizards valued independence. I set down my new supplies and looked around. Not bad, I decided. My new life as a wizard apprentice was about to begin. After mapping the entire academy, I settled into student life. My neighbor, a friendly apprentice named Sorn, invited me to join a mutual aid society. I declined bluntly and warned him it wouldn't last. In the wizard world, knowledge was too valuable to share freely. The talented members would quickly realize the others only dragged them down and leave. For the next few months, I followed a relentless routine. Every day, I attended free basic courses in the teaching area, then spent hours in the library absorbing everything. Basic life science, anatomy, life analysis, spell model construction, flesh analysis, mental power theory. The chip recorded and stored it all. Within 2 weeks, I'd consumed every publicly available book in the library. Even my great night body felt dizzy from processing that much information at once. I was incredibly lucky to have Lillian as my mentor. Normal apprentices had to assist their teachers with experiments, clean labs, and run errands. Lillian exempted me from all of that, letting me focus entirely on learning. Housing was free, and new students had no expenses, so magic stones weren't a concern yet. 3 months passed this way. I was attending dozens of courses simultaneously, earning praise from every teacher. One professor, named Wilder, even asked Lillian to transfer me to his guidance. I'd also started teaching my own weekend class on spell model theory, charging magic stones. It was wildly popular, with even senior apprentices attending. While my classmates hadn't even reached third-level apprentice yet, I already had income. The gossip never stopped. Other students called me Monster Green because I seemed to never rest. They whispered about my first-rate talent, my second-level apprentice status before enrollment, and Lillian's obvious favoritism. Today was the final lecture on spell model theory, taught by Professor Karina, a beautiful woman with green hair, golden eyes, and a black staff topped with a green gem. She explained the key concept. Spell models built in external space were essentially single-use. For practical combat, wizards needed to solidify spell models inside their mental space for instant casting. But the process had strict requirements: sufficient mental power, high elemental affinity with the chosen spell, and extreme care, since the number of permanent spells a person could hold was limited. I smiled quietly at that last warning. Other people's mental space had finite capacity, but my chip could store millions of spell models. Even temporary construction was effortless with the chip handling the calculations. This limitation simply didn't apply to me. Karina finished by advertising her advanced paid course, then left quickly. Free lectures never included Q&A. Wizards were too busy for that. I headed to Lillian's lab to claim my free spell templates. As a second-level apprentice, I was entitled to 2. On the way, I thought about my elemental situation. My life and fire affinity made those spells extremely cheap to cast, but anything involving negative energy or corrosion would cost double the mental power and even damage me. No point chasing perfection. Better to maximize my strengths and cover my weaknesses. Lillian had already prepared 2 templates for me: Trance Summoning and Minor Energy Fireball. She'd chosen carefully. As a great knight with a life barrier that could block any apprentice-level attack, I didn't need more defense. The Trance would be far stronger when I summoned it than when other apprentices did, thanks to my life affinity. The Fireball covered ranged offense with my secondary fire element. She reminded me not to leave the academy for missions until I'd mastered at least 5 spells. I promised I wouldn't go anywhere without proper preparation. Back in my room, I held the 2 crystal balls, one glowing green, one red, and felt genuine excitement. Finally, real combat spells beyond just Wizard's Hand. I entered meditation and had the chip extract the spell contents. Then something unexpected happened. The chip detected optimization opportunities in both new spell models. I asked why it hadn't done this with Wizard's Hand before. The answer was simple. Back then, I hadn't learned enough theory. Now, armed with knowledge from dozens of courses on spell principles, energy flow, and mental power utilization, the chip could redesign the models. Optimize everything. All 3 spells. The results were staggering. Wizard's Hand. Casting time compressed to 0.2 seconds. Energy consumption cut in half. Trance Summoning. Casting compressed to 1 second. Trance strength up 27%. Fire resistance up 32%. Energy cost down 13%. Minor Energy Fireball. Casting compressed to 0.1 seconds. Added continuous burning and explosion effects. Direct damage up 72%. Energy cost down 15%. This wasn't optimization. It was complete reconstruction. Any wizard who saw these improvements would be shocked. The optimization cost 14 mental power points and about 3.5 hours. I could feel the fatigue as the chip worked at full speed, but it was manageable. I checked my updated stats. Strength, 6.2. Speed, 6.2. Constitution, 6.2. Mental power, 22. Being consumed during optimization. Talent, life barrier, all element resistance. Skills, Wizard's Hand, optimizing. Trance Summoning, optimizing. Minor Energy Fireball, optimizing. My physical stats had each risen by 0.1. The limit meditation method was slowly enhancing my body alongside my mental growth. The all-element resistance, note on my life barrier, meant no elemental attack type could exploit a weakness in my defense. I'd added that annotation myself after reading a detailed analysis of Great Knight barriers in the library. I had the chip calculate how many spells I could permanently solidify. 5. Though this number would grow as my mental power increased. Full wizards typically mastered hundreds of spells, but could only solidify about 10, mostly defensive ones. Since my Great Night Life barrier already blocked any apprentice-level attack, Lillian had wisely given me offensive spells instead. The chip finished optimizing all 3 spell models. I began solidification. The optimized versions were far more complex than the originals, so demanding that no ordinary apprentice could build them even with the blueprints. Only the chip's computational power made it possible. After solidifying all 3, I checked their stats. Wizard's Hand, 30-meter range, 0.2 second cast, minimum 1 mental power per hour. Trance Summoning, 3 mental power cost, 1 second cast. Pure Energy Trance lasted 30 minutes, but using a real seed extended duration to 3 hours with special abilities. Minor Energy Fireball, 1 mental power, 0.1 second cast, 200-meter range, now with explosion and burning effects. The next afternoon, I went to the spell testing facility, a heavily fortified castle at the Academy's edge, covered in runes for energy containment, structural reinforcement, and automatic energy balancing. I rented a private testing room for 3 hours at 1 magic stone per hour. My weekend tutoring classes had earned me over 100 stones already. The private room was enormous, the size of a university sports field, with targets labeled for different armor types and defensive spells. I fired my first energy fireball. The explosion rocked the room, flames clinging to the armored target and burning for dozens of seconds before dying out. The display read, Initial Attack Strength 5, Sustained Burn 1. I had the chip recalibrate its measurement system to match wizard standards. 1 unit equaled the radiation from a single unit of neutral elemental energy. My life barrier could withstand 30 units, vastly above normal Great Knights at 5 to 7. Apprentice spells typically hit 3 to 5. Even full wizard spells only reached 15 to 25. I could tank a direct hit from a formal wizard. Next, I tested Pure Energy Trance Summoning. A 3-meter tree creature materialized and punched the target for 2 points of physical damage, equivalent to an official knight's full-strength blow, delivered tirelessly without fatigue. Then the real test. I dropped an acorn and cast Trance Summoning properly. Life energy flooded into the seed. A 7-meter giant erupted from the ground. Its stats were incredible: Strength 5, Speed 3, Constitution 6, with natural healing aura, fire resistance, 6-point damage resistance skin, and a binding vine attack. No apprentice could defeat this thing. They'd exhaust their mental power before scratching it. Its physical attack registered at 5, the absolute peak for 0-level spells. I need more life element spells, I said, grinning at the numbers. With my elemental affinity creating such dramatic improvements, every life spell I learned would be massively amplified. I rushed to the Academy's sales district to buy more 0-level life spells. At the Academy's trading district, I went to buy spell templates. The clerk, a bored gray-robed apprentice, tossed me a crystal ball containing every basic spell available. I searched for life element spells. The results were disappointing, fewer than 100 options. Life affinity was rare, so fewer spells had been developed for it. But that didn't matter to me. With the chip, I could learn any number of spells instantly. It could store spell structures just like solidified ones, with only slightly longer casting times. I'll take all the life spells, and all the auxiliary spells too. The clerk nearly choked. All of them, 279 templates, 1 magic stone each. Here's my card. Seeing my magic stone card, his attitude shifted. Only students with serious resources carried those. He processed everything quickly, transferring the spell data into a new crystal ball using an incantation that left him sweating and exhausted. As I turned to leave, someone called my name. A handsome, golden-haired young man in light armor stood there grinning. "You don't recognize me?" "It's Bruce," I stared. This was the same person who'd looked 70 years old on the ship. His youth potion had worked perfectly. He now looked like a dashing young nobleman. Bruce noticed my crystal ball full of spell templates and offered to sponsor me. I declined. My weekend tutoring business had made me plenty of magic stones. He told me about an upcoming event, the Pale Forest Monster Sweep, held every 3 years. Wizards constantly radiated energy, causing nearby animals to mutate into magical creatures. White wizard mutations were relatively mild, but left unchecked they'd grow stronger over time. The Academy organized mass clearing operations, using them as training exercises for apprentices. This highlighted the difference between white and black wizards. White academies ran these as group operations to minimize student deaths. Black academies simply posted solo patrol missions in dangerous zones, forcing cash-strapped apprentices into deadly situations, which is why their student mortality rate stayed permanently high. Bruce explained that as a new student, I'd mainly observe and learn combat techniques from senior apprentices. But as a second-level apprentice, I could actually contribute and would be very welcome on any team. Want to join my squad? I'll guarantee your safety, Bruce offered confidently. I agreed. Better to team up with someone I knew and trusted than strangers. We discussed the details, then parted ways. With the forest sweep a month away, I needed to prepare. I chose my remaining 2 spell solidification slots carefully, Illusion Break and Curse Removal. I wasn't afraid of direct combat. It was the sneaky stuff like curses and hallucinations that worried me. The chip built models for all my other spells too, ready for instant temporary casting when needed. The next morning, I headed to my personal lab on the 26th floor. The door looked ordinary, but the chip detected a defensive enchantment. It would absorb any attack and return it doubled, handling up to 25 units. Enough to stop a full wizard's assault. Every wizard took lab security seriously. I presented Lillian's scroll. The door scanned it, confirmed her authority, then asked for my mental power imprint. I released my mental energy and felt it ripple across the door's surface like touching water. The scroll dissolved into particles, and the door opened. Inside was beautiful, a basketball court-sized lab packed with pristine instruments, beakers, glass rods, petri dishes, measuring cylinders, scales, and more. Everything was brand new and high quality. Having a good mentor made all the difference. A storage room in the back held shelves of labeled materials preserved by a freshness enchantment. Everything I needed for basic potion making. I gathered ingredients for my first wizard standard potion, a secondary life potion, green fruits, a plant root stem, and a still-beating organ-like specimen kept alive on ice. Before touching anything, I had the chips simulate the entire brewing process. A full 3D model played out in my vision, showing me failing repeatedly at first, then gradually succeeding as I accumulated experience with the real-world variables. The simulation results: after 10 attempts, 10% success rate. After 20 attempts, 50%. After 50 attempts, 85%. After 100 attempts, 99%. I smiled. The key insight was clear. Wizard potion making was difficult because of unpredictable environmental interference and tiny material variations that no amount of talent alone could overcome. Only experience taught you to sense these micro differences and adjust in real time. But with the chip recording every variable from each attempt and feeding the corrections back to me, my learning curve would be exponentially faster than any normal apprentice. Each failure would directly improve the next attempt's odds. The chip transmitted the complete brewing sequence into my brain, every possible complication and its solution, as if I'd already practiced hundreds of times. I felt ready to begin my first real attempt. Let's begin. I picked up a fist-sized spirit fruit from its container, a special fruit created through elemental radiation, packed with violent life energy. A normal person eating one would bleed to death internally from the overwhelming power. It had to be diluted before use. I crushed it in a press, collected the green juice in a beaker, measured the exact amount on a scale, and transferred it to a heating vessel. The magical heater activated with a touch of mental power, far more convenient than any alcohol lamp from my past life, with adjustable intensity. After 2 minutes of boiling, I began the delicate dilution, 1 drop of pure water at a time for over 10 minutes, reducing the concentration to 1/10. The liquid shifted from murky green to a translucent emerald. The chips signaled the critical threshold. I immediately cut exactly 15 grams of Isa tree root, not a fraction more or less, and dropped it in. The bubbling stopped instantly, the color turned red, and a strange woody floral scent filled the room. For 7 minutes, the chip monitored every change in the mixture. Chemical properties, molecular structure, elemental concentration. The room was completely silent except for the heater's hum. The moment the timer hit 0, I split Wizard's hand into 2 simultaneous operations, one lifting the forest leopard's heart from its icy container, the other raising the beaker. I began chanting in a strange, bird-like melody that made the heart beat wildly. I poured the liquid through the heart's blood vessels. It turned from red to green as biological conversion took place over 10 minutes. Then I spoke the activation incantation and synced my mental power with the heart's rhythm. The organ began sweating emerald liquid. I caught every drop in a beaker below. As the liquid drained, the heartbeat slowed. Once finished, I quickly returned the heart to its cold container. It could be reused. First attempt, and it worked. I checked with the chip. Result: secondary life potion, quality rating, good. Not excellent. The chip identified 2 flaws. My flame control had a slight mental power fluctuation, and I'd been a fraction late cutting the tree root. Solutions: let the chip directly assist with mental power stabilization during brewing and pre-cut ingredients in advance. I was annoyed at myself, though any other apprentice would have been ecstatic. Normal students needed over 100 attempts before their first success. Most failed due to mental power control issues. The slightest loss of concentration ruined everything. With the chip handling precision, that particular problem basically didn't exist for me. Again, second attempt. The chip handled mental adjustments in real time. 0 timing errors. Perfect control throughout. Excellent quality secondary life potion. I carefully filled 10 glass vials with the glowing emerald liquid. Each tiny bottle could save someone from near death, restore some mental power, and sold for 10 magic stones. Always in high demand among apprentices. I held up a vial, watching it catch the light. Near 100% success rate in potion making would be considered impossible in the wizard world. Until I had absolute power to protect myself, nobody could ever know about this. For the remaining weeks before the forest sweep, I split my time between the potion lab and the spell testing facility, building practical combat experience to supplement the chip simulations. Theory was good, but real-world practice mattered too. Before the sweep, Lillian called me in and repeatedly warned me to be extra careful this time. Something about the way she kept emphasizing it told me this year's trial would be different from previous ones. Her unusual concern put me on high alert. I spent extra time in the lab preparing more supplies and contingencies. On the day, I arrived at the mission area fully equipped: light armor, 2 swords, a shoulder bag, and a large pack on my back. The place was packed with apprentices, most wearing armor instead of gray robes. Experienced students chatted confidently, while a few battle-scarred ones sat in grim silence. A massive light screen displayed available missions in red, yellow, and green based on danger level. I'd never visited this area before. My tutoring income meant I'd never needed mission rewards. All 2,575 apprentices were gathered, including 725 new students like me. Then a white-robed wizard appeared and announced the rules. Everyone had to enter the Pale Forest and survive for 1 month. Upon returning, each apprentice had to submit 10 monster cores or face expulsion. Teams of 3 to 5 were allowed. New students who went solo didn't need to collect any cores, just survive. But new students who joined a team reduced each teammate's requirement to 7 cores while shouldering 3 cores themselves. The expulsion threat sent shockwaves through the crowd. Previous sweeps had never carried such harsh penalties. Students who'd prepared lightly panicked. New students suddenly became highly sought after as team members. I saw through the real danger immediately. As time passed in the forest, desperate students without enough cores would inevitably start robbing others. This trial would turn bloody. I had the chip analyze the situation using Academy history. The answer was clear. Every time the White House Academy had shifted to harsher training methods, war with the Black Wizards followed. Current intelligence suggested a massive magic stone deposit had been discovered in the Kransa Mountains, and both sides were preparing to fight over it. What is my luck? War follows me everywhere. First, the Saladin invasion forced me to flee. Now, 3 months into wizard school, a resource war was brewing. I went looking for Bruce's team. When I found them, a large bald man covered in rune tattoos was anxiously asking Bruce whether I'd actually show up. With the rules suddenly changed, having a second-level apprentice and Great Knight on the team was invaluable. I'd boost their combat power while my new student status reduced everyone's core requirement. Bruce was scanning the crowd nervously, worried I might back out since teaming up offered me no real benefit. "Sorry I'm late, Bruce," I said, appearing beside him. Bruce jumped when I appeared beside him, stumbling forward a few steps before turning around. His face lit up with relief. He introduced his teammates. Sane, a huge bald guy covered in rune tattoos. Earth Element Affinity, second-level apprentice, the team's tank and defense specialist. Mytel, a dark-haired guy with a cool attitude, Wind Element, second-level apprentice, providing mobility and support attacks. Asha, a red-haired girl with a striking figure, Fire Element, first-level apprentice, the team's main damage dealer. Bruce himself handled control spells. I scanned everyone quietly. Bruce, Strength 2.4, Speed 2.3, Constitution 2.3, Mental Power 16. Sane, Strength 2.7, Speed 2.1, Constitution 2.5, Mental Power 15. Mytel, Strength 2.2, Speed 2.6, Constitution 2.0, Mental Power 15. Asha, Strength 2.3, Speed 2.5, Constitution 2.5, Mental Power 22. All Knight Apprentices physically, nothing special. Asha's mental power matched mine at 22. Impressive for a first-level apprentice. But combat power wasn't just about stats. The right spell could change everything. Bruce outlined the plan. Start safe by hunting white crows. Easy targets they had experience catching. If they could bag 10 to 20 early, they'd only need a few dangerous monster kills to meet the quota. Everyone agreed. No reason to take unnecessary risks right away. Bruce registered our team and handed out squad badges. Then the white-robed wizard shouted for everyone to prepare. A massive magic circle lit up beneath all 2,575 apprentices. White light blazed, space twisted, and I felt like dough being squeezed through a press. An instant later, we stood in the white forest. My teammates immediately vomited from the spatial transfer sickness. My Great Knight Constitution shrugged it off completely. I waited patiently until they recovered. "Where do we find white crows?" I asked. Bruce wiped his mouth and explained. The crows were semi-intelligent, gathering at water sources in groups with sentries posted. Finding a lake meant finding crows. They had experience with the capture technique. He turned to Sane, who pulled out a tube of yellow powder. He sprinkled some on his fingertip and drew a large pentagram on the ground. The powder never seemed to run out. He chanted a spell, and a yellow earthen face rose from the ground, silently turning to face the direction of the nearest lake. Sane released the spell. The pentagram faded. The powder vanished, like nothing had happened. "Let's move," Bruce said. Sane's found the nearest lake. "We start there." We marched through the white forest for 7 hours following Sane's tracking spell. Every tree looked identical, pure white, endlessly repeating. Without direction spells, anyone would get hopelessly lost. We reached a lake, but it was shrouded in dense fog. A fog lake. Bad luck. The fog blocked detection spells, meaning if even one white crow escaped into the mist, it would warn others, and the entire area would be abandoned by the birds for a long time. Everyone's faces fell. Bruce looked miserable. They debated whether to leave or stay. I stepped forward. "Let me try? My archery is very good. If we time it right, we can get them all." Bruce immediately trusted me and had the team set up their trap. Sane prepared a gravity spell on the ground. Mytel rigged an air disruption trap. Bruce placed his secret weapon, a special scent agent he'd developed that mimicked fresh meat and contained a compound that specifically lowered white crow's self-control without attracting other predators. Asha found a good attack position. We hid and waited. Hours passed in the eerie white forest, the setting sun casting blood-red beams through the canopy. Then, the calling. 12 white crows appeared on the surrounding branches. Each was over 50 centimeters long with razor claws and scythe-like beaks. The others looked panicked. 12 was too many. I quietly drew my custom bow, strapped my quiver to my left hip, and activated the chip's targeting system. Wind speed, humidity, escape trajectory predictions, everything calculated in real time. I waited until several crows were clustered together, then released 3 arrows simultaneously. 3 crows were pinned to the ground before anyone else moved. Sane roared. His voice carried a sonic spell that momentarily stunned the remaining birds. The gravity trap activated, slamming 4 more to the ground. 5 tried to escape upward. Mytel unleashed his wind trap, disrupting their flight and slowing them down. Asha fired a massive fireball that blasted 1 out of the sky. I fired 3 more arrows in rapid succession. 3 more crows dropped. 1 left, already diving into the fog. My teammates' faces showed resignation. The bird was gone. Nobody could blame me. Killing 11 out of 12 was already incredible. I drew 1 last arrow. The chip's red targeting dot locked onto the crow even as it vanished into the white mist. I released. The arrow disappeared into the fog. A wet thud, then a splash. All 4 teammates turned to stare at me in disbelief. The last crow, invisible in the fog, had been pierced by my arrow. 12 for 12. My teammates stared at me in shock. White crows had Knight Apprentice level toughness at minimum, with magic-resistant feathers that shrugged off indirect spell hits. Killing them with ordinary arrows required force that even top great knights would struggle to match. Bruce couldn't believe my 3 arrows at once technique. I kept my thoughts to myself. With auto-aim and target lock, missing would have been embarrassing. I reminded everyone to finish off the trapped crows and clean up before more arrived. I cast a scent concealment spell to block the blood smell from spreading. The others jumped into action, though they kept glancing at me. Without anyone saying it, I'd become the team's real leader. Mytel carefully extracted each crow's eyes with a small knife. These were the monster cores. White crow eyes were used for vision enhancement potions. We buried the bodies, and I sealed the pit with another concealment spell to eliminate the blood scent completely. Bruce was surprised I knew such an uncommon utility spell. Most apprentices only learned attack and defense magic. I brushed it off, said I'd bought it on impulse, and found it easy to learn. Night fell. We moved away from the lake since monster activity increased near water after dark. We built a fire in the forest. The pale forest absorbed so much ambient energy that nighttime temperatures dropped dangerously low. Even night apprentice bodies couldn't handle prolonged exposure without warmth. Around the fire, Bruce told me the team wanted me to distribute the loot. I'd killed 7 of 12 crows, so I took 7 pairs of eyes. Nobody objected. Without me, they'd have been lucky to catch 5, and the angry survivors might have counterattacked and wiped them out. I handed the remaining 5 pairs back for them to split among themselves using their usual system. Bruce wisely decided to pool everything and divide it at the end of the mission, avoiding early disagreements. We set up a watch rotation, pairs taking 5-hour shifts with one person resting each night. Tonight was Bruce and me first, then Asha and Mytel. Sane had used too much mental power on tracking spells and got the night off. Bruce activated a crystal ball that projected a dome around our camp, hiding our scent and containing the fire's heat signature. The camp went quiet. In the darkness beyond our shield, occasional screams pierced the forest, some creature being devoured by the white trees. After a quiet night, the chip monitored everything while I slept. I woke refreshed. The others looked terrible, dark circles under their eyes from the cold. We each swallowed stamina pills and prepared to move. Then the chip flashed urgent warnings. 2 separate elemental energy bursts detected about 650 meters away. Ice and wind attributes, both at apprentice spell levels. Someone was fighting. I alerted the team and pointed the direction. Everyone tensed up. We'd known student-on-student conflict was inevitable with the expulsion threat, but it was happening faster than expected. This is our opportunity, I said. Let 2 sides exhaust each other, then we benefit. Mytel raised a fair point. It could just be students fighting monsters. But Sane argued we needed to investigate either way, since they were dangerously close to our position. We crept toward the sounds. The energy impacts grew more violent. Definitely 2 people fighting each other, not hunting. Then I heard a name that made my heart skip. Newt. Never thought you'd end up at my mercy. Newt. The man who'd guided me through the academy on my first day. We peered through the undergrowth at a devastated clearing. Dozens of white trees lay shattered. Newt was face down on the ground, his right arm severed at the forearm, blood pooling everywhere. He was finished. Standing over him was a golden-haired apprentice in a black robe, 1 foot on Newt's head, taunting him. The apprentice held an enchanted sword crackling with lightning. Then the attacker tore off his face, literally ripped away a disguise. Underneath was a nightmare. Hairless, skin charred, and rotting like it had been burned then left to decay. Gray-white eyes with no life in them. Missing cheeks exposing teeth. He looked like a dissected zombie. I felt my stomach lurch. So this was what Black Wizard experiments did to people. The zombie apprentice kicked Newt so hard he flew through the air, spinning before crashing down. Blood sprayed from his severed arm, and some droplets landed on the zombie's face and were absorbed into his skin. He kept ranting about how Newt had stolen his potion apprentice spot years ago, forcing him into field missions where Black Wizards captured him and implanted a mental brand. To demonstrate his superior power, he stabbed a dagger into his own thigh. Yellow pus oozed out, filling the air with a stench like rotten eggs mixed with garbage. Everyone on my team covered their mouths, faces white. But when he pulled the blade out, the pus flowed back in and the wound sealed instantly. My disgust was instantly replaced by scientific interest. What incredible regeneration, and a perfect research specimen with 0 moral complications. Chip, scan him. I needed full data before making my move. No point rushing in if he was somehow beyond my level, though that seemed nearly impossible. The chip finished scanning. The zombie apprentice, Aichi, had impressive stats: strength 4.5, speed 4.7, constitution 5.0, mental power 17, but declining. His body was in genetic collapse from whatever the Black Wizards had done to him. Newt was in bad shape. Massive blood loss, constitution dropping steadily, but he still had 5 points of mental power, enough for one last spell. He was playing possum, waiting for his moment. Bruce whispered that Aichi had been a talented student who lost to Newt in the annual potion apprentice selection. Without academy support, he'd taken outside missions, gotten captured by Black Wizards, and been experimented on. They'd implanted a mental brand, a soul magic slave mark that killed the victim if the caster died. He'd returned to the academy as either an escapee or, more likely, a planted agent. Aichi kept kicking Newt around, savoring every moment. But Newt just stared back with cold, emotionless eyes, waiting. When Aichi raised his sword for the killing blow, Newt struck. He shouted a command word, and black light erupted from his chest. A wizard tool, a device containing a preloaded first-level spell. A massive black dome expanded outward, covering nearly 100 meters. Everything inside turned black and white. Time slowed to a crawl. Only Newt could move freely. He dragged himself up, walked to the frozen Aichi, took the dagger from his hand, and drove it into Aichi's brain. The field collapsed. Color returned. Aichi fell. Newt collapsed beside him, completely spent. But the chip hadn't registered Aichi's death. I kept watching. Sure enough, Aichi stood back up laughing, pulled the dagger from his own skull. Yellow-green pus leaked from the hole. Through the gap, I could see his skull was hollow. No brain inside. I've been modified. My brain isn't my weak point anymore. Newt's composure finally cracked. He had nothing left. He started dragging himself backward as Aichi advanced with his sword, enjoying the terror on Newt's face. I'd seen enough. Chip, targeting assist. I drew my bow and knocked an arrow. Then I chanted 4 enchantments simultaneously. The chip built all 4 spell models in a fraction of a second, layering them onto the arrow without pause. Explosion, splitting, non-healing, and life force dispersal. Aichi heard my voice and started to turn. The arrow was already flying. Mid-flight, the single arrow split into 10, each targeting a different part of Aichi's body. They struck with pinpoint accuracy. The explosion was massive. Every impact point on Aichi's body detonated like a bomb. His entire form blew apart. Limbs, torso, everything scattered across the clearing in pieces. Aichi's body parts scattered across the clearing. Everyone went silent from the shock. The chip confirmed death, life signs gone, mental power dissipated, flesh rapidly losing vitality. I pulled rubber gloves from my pack and cast a curse isolation spell on them, then started collecting the scattered flesh with obvious enthusiasm. These were priceless research samples, a body modified by Black Wizard techniques with extraordinary regeneration abilities. My teammates watched me cheerfully gathering bloody chunks and assembling them back into a rough body shape. I could feel them edging away from me. Bruce's team looked more frightened of my excited smile than they'd been of Aichi's insanity. Newt, leaning against a tree with his wounds bandaged, watched me knowingly. He's collecting the body for experiments, he told the others calmly. He understood. He was a potion apprentice too. I stored the reassembled corpse using a one-time spatial scroll I'd bought from the academy shop. The silver light wrapped around the body, space twisted, and everything disappeared into the scroll. Expensive, but worth it. Newt was recovering. His physical wounds were closing thanks to healing potions, but the mental exhaustion from using that wizard tool, a device preloaded with a first-level stasis spell, had drained him badly. Newt, good to see you, I said casually. He shook his head in disbelief. Lillian said you were a genius. I didn't believe it until now. Bruce asked what we should do next. I suggested waiting. The academy had given Newt a wizard tool, which meant they were tracking him. Help would arrive soon. Moments later, the chip detected a spatial disturbance. A portal opened and a white-robed wizard named Torres stepped through, Newt's mentor. I explained the situation, deliberately spreading the credit across the whole team rather than claiming the kill myself. Torres could obviously sense that only 3 people's spell signatures were at the scene, but he didn't press the point. The rescue was real. Details didn't matter. He offered us a reward. I asked without hesitation, could we pass the forest trial immediately? Torres considered it. then used a secret communication spell to contact the academy. After a moment, he agreed. Killing a first-level black wizard apprentice exceeded the trial's requirements by far. Bruce's team could barely contain their joy. They'd done almost nothing in the actual fight, but I'd shared the credit with them. They looked at me with deep gratitude. With Newt somewhat recovered, Torres led us all back toward the academy entrance. I was already thinking about getting to my lab. Aichi's body was waiting to be studied. While I dove into research, the academy was dealing with a crisis. The discovery that a black wizard had infiltrated undetected alarmed the leadership. The vice dean called an emergency meeting of all school wizards to decide whether to continue the forest trial. They voted to proceed. War over the Kransa mountain magic stone deposits was approaching, and this trial served as preparation. However, all new students were recalled immediately. Senior students would continue, but wizards were dispatched along every return path to guard against black wizard ambushes. The array school was ordered to fix the academy's defensive formations. I barely noticed any of this. The moment we returned, I said goodbye to everyone, reported to Lillian, and locked myself in my lab. Aichi's reassembled corpse lay on the cleared experiment table. I put on my lab coat, mask, and protective enchantments, then began cutting. The first thing I noticed was wrong. His flesh didn't feel like meat. It was rubbery, almost like gelatin. Under the microscope, the picture became clear over 3 days of intense study. Aichi's cells had been fundamentally altered. A foreign gene had been spliced into his DNA, one that reproduced without limit, converting normal cell structure into an unknown gelatinous substance. This gel had far greater resilience than normal muscle tissue, explaining his rapid self-healing. The gel also wrapped around brain cells and redistributed them throughout the body. That's why his skull was empty. His brain wasn't gone, just spread everywhere. But the modification was deeply flawed. The foreign gene's uncontrolled replication consumed enormous energy and accumulated copying errors with each generation. Eventually, the accumulated genetic damage would cause total systemic collapse. Aichi had been a ticking time bomb. Brutal and unstable. Classic black wizard work, I muttered. Then inspiration struck. What if I combined this foreign gene with the Hello's parasite's genetics? The two organisms represented opposite extremes. Aichi's gene replicated recklessly with no self-control, while the parasite carefully regulated itself, even sacrificing its own body to protect its host. But both shared one trait. They enhanced the host's physical resilience and healed wounds. If I could merge these two genetic approaches, the aggressive regeneration of Aichi's modification controlled by the parasite's self-limiting instincts, I might create a symbiotic organism that could protect its host's body, automatically repair combat damage, and reproduce only within safe limits. My mind raced with possibilities. This could be revolutionary. 7 days of non-stop work left me with dark circles and bloodshot eyes, but the results were frustrating. Every attempt to directly fuse the Hello's parasite's protective genes with Aichi's aggressive regeneration genes failed. The moment both gene types entered the same organism, they went to war. The parasite would tear itself apart, split into fragments that attacked and devoured each other in an endless cycle until energy ran out. The problem was clear. I'd chosen the wrong carrier. The Hello's parasite's genome was too complex and specialized to accept foreign DNA without violent rejection. Then I remembered something from my past life. Bacteriophages, tiny organisms that naturally integrate host genes during infection. I needed something similar in this world. The chip found dozens of candidates. I chose the Prolos bloodworm, a microscopic parasite that absorbed host genetics when infecting creatures, adapting to better target similar species. Its gene acceptance capacity was broad, and it could infect virtually any organism. I separated the useful gene segments from both the Hello's parasite and Aichi's cells, then implanted them into host cells that the Prolos bloodworm would naturally infect. This way, the worm would acquire both genes through its natural absorption process rather than forced injection. I weakened test mice's immune systems and let the worms infect freely. Some worms successfully picked up both gene types, but the conflict killed them almost immediately. The two genetic programs fought each other to death inside each tiny body. I didn't give up. I bred generation after generation, each time selecting survivors that tolerated the conflict slightly longer. With each generation, the rejection weakened. After many cycles, the bloodworms finally stabilized, carrying both genes without conflict. But the genes were dormant, suppressed as recessive traits. I needed to activate them. Using wizard precision, my mental power shaped into microscopic blades far better than any surgical laser from my old world. I stressed individual worms to trigger gene expression. Most died from the attack, but a small number activated both genes simultaneously, beginning to consume dead worms around them and rapidly self-repair. I isolated the activated survivors and bred them through more generations, selecting only those expressing both traits openly. 3 days later, I stared at a small red canister, 5 centimeters wide, 10 tall, filled with a living mass of engineered bloodworms. To the naked eye, the container looked like it held red liquid, but under magnification, it teemed with millions of microscopic organisms carrying my dual gene design. Phase 1 complete. Now it's time for wizard techniques to finish the job. I held up the red canister and smiled. The hardest part, genetic engineering, was done. The next phase would actually be easier thanks to wizard magic. In my old world, controlling microscopic organisms at this level would require impossible precision. Here, a single bonding spell could handle what no technology could. I'd spent 500 magic stones, everything I had, on a mass contract scroll. It was covered in tiny purple runes that, once activated, would bind the bloodworms to my will through blood and soul. I cut my finger and began chanting. My blood dripped onto the floating scroll and sank into its surface. The purple runes blazed to life. I opened the canister and squeezed more blood inside. 2 beams of purple light shot out, one into me, one into the container. The scroll disintegrated into nothing. Instantly, I felt a connection. Blood and soul bonded to every worm in that canister. I willed them to move, and they crawled up the container walls obediently. You're not Prolos bloodworms anymore. From today, you're symbiotes. 3 days of testing followed. I infected lab mice and used my control to prevent uncontrolled reproduction. Instead of parasitizing, the symbiotes formed balanced ecosystems inside each mouse, supporting rather than draining the host. The real test. I snipped off a mouse's right front paw with scissors. Then I sent a mental command to activate repair. The bleeding stopped instantly. Red tendrils erupted from the wound, reaching and weaving through the air, fusing together to fill the gap. Within 30 seconds, a complete new paw had grown. Pink, healthy, perfectly shaped. Stable gene integration. No more mutations. I shuddered remembering earlier experiments. Before the symbiotes were properly calibrated, repairs had gone horrifyingly wrong. Eyeballs growing from wounds, mouths forming with 10-centimeter tongues, random organs protruding, writhing tentacles waving in the air. Those images would haunt me forever. I shook off the memory and assessed my progress. 3 more generations of selective breeding, and the symbiotes would fully stabilize their cooperative behavior. Then I could implant them in myself. I wasn't squeamish about hosting microscopic organisms. Humans already carry trillions of bacteria. I'd accepted a quantum chip into my brain in my past life. A few more passengers wouldn't bother me, though I'd definitely be making capsules rather than swallowing the worms directly. Even I had limits. 3 days later, I swallowed the capsules containing my engineered symbiotes. Heat spread from my stomach through my entire body, followed by an intense tingling sensation. The chip's scan showed remarkable results. My stats hadn't changed much physically, but the symbiotes brought 7 new abilities: gene acquisition, ultra-speed recovery, weakness reduction, elemental radiation resistance, self-gene repair, gene lock, and ultra-speed energy conversion. My recovery speed now exceeded my body's natural limits. Even more surprising, the symbiotes were absorbing ambient radiation and evolving, gradually increasing my affinity with all elements. I held up my finger, and a flame appeared with barely any mental effort. My fire element control had noticeably improved. My appearance changed too. My hair turned red and my eyes became crimson from the symbiote integration. The red hair was too conspicuous, so I used mental commands to turn it black. The red eyes I kept. Plenty of people in the academy had unusual eye colors. Weeks passed. I focused on potion making to solve my magic stone shortage. I deliberately brewed a slightly flawed secondary life potion. Producing a perfect one this early would attract too much suspicion. I intentionally made a few timing errors to create a barely successful result. I brought it to Lillian. When I told her I'd brewed a successful potion, her voice shot up in shock. She tested it thoroughly, checking the spirit fruit processing, the dilution, the ISO root timing, the mental power control. She found real flaws, but the bottom line was clear. I produced a working potion. You really are a genius at potion making, she said, beaming like she'd found a treasure. Then her expression turned serious. She asked about my plans, mentioning that war was likely coming and the academy wasn't safe. As the Limit School's only successor, she couldn't guarantee keeping me away from the front lines unless I left. I'll follow your arrangements, teacher, I said. She nodded with satisfaction. As I turned to leave, she called out one last time and tossed me a necklace. It contains an instant first-level spatial transfer spell. Even against a full wizard, it will guarantee your escape. Before I could thank her properly, an invisible force pushed me out the door and it slammed shut. I stood in the hallway, looking down at the necklace in my hands. I bowed deeply toward the closed door, then turned and walked away.